book. So,
yes, that makes
sense. Okay, so let's see.
Is it distracting if I circle my Christmas tree over the...
I can't even see you for a minute here.
Oh no, okay.
Let's see, next. Drum roll.
Oh yeah, and as soon as we get this, you get it actually up on Facebook, I'll share it real fast. You're at the top of my search. I always am searching for your profile.
Let me see, how about I don't share this with only me?
Makes sense.
Okay, it looks like it's connected. Okay. And it wants a title. I guess today is like day 27. Actually, I'll put that parenthetical in a moment. Let's see. Okay. And let's see. I think I just click go live, and then it does the magic thing.
Yay. Reload. It'll show up eventually.
It's still saying setting up your meeting. Done. Redirecting to Facebook Live page. Drum roll.
There we are.
Are we there?
Yep.
Woo! Okay, cool. Yeah, it even says live up here. All right, cool. And I bet, actually, I wonder if, I actually have no idea how to see the comments while I'm doing this, so maybe I'll just ignore it for now.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, if we're on Zoom and not on Facebook, I don't know how we would see.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm going to risk something. This might break everything. I'm going to see what happens if I open the Facebook Live. And, okay, it's not making sound that's driving me crazy.
Yeah, that's good. Check.
Oh, there we go. If I mute it, okay, great. Now I can, it's a little delayed, but I can actually go see that. So and is there a way for me to, yeah, for anybody watching, just bear with this chaos here as I learn how this even works.
Yeah.
Okay, now I think I can see it if people add in comments.
Yeah, I've got it up too, so.
Okay, awesome.
Yay.
Cool.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty excited too. I'm like feeling all kinds of jitters of like, just from our chat from last week, and then you coming in with having a plan, which is a lot more than I had.
I felt like, so when I spoke to you and I was excited about it, and then I was like, what are we going to talk about, or like, how would I? And I was like, whoa, that doesn't belong here. Like, I've got days. Like, I experienced so much in days. Like, no. All of this stuff was like falling apart and coming together, and all of these things. So I just waited until, and then I was like, I should watch, the couple of lives that I've missed. And I had no idea you were doing a 100-day thing, which is really amazing to me because I do everything in 100 days. Like, that's just my thing that I do. If I decide I want to change something in my life, I set 100 days that I'm going to do like a little bit every day or whatever. And I find like around day 60 or so, it's like, why am I even counting days? This is just how life is, And I really love that effect. So I do things in 100 days. So when I saw that, I was like, mind blown, like, oh my God, he's doing 100 days. Hello, like little signs that you're on the right path. But then I didn't have any idea that you'd done like 25. So yesterday, like morning, I was like, all right, like double speed YouTube video. I started, of course, I was also like hanging out with my family and watching movies and stuff. And so I got like somewhat through maybe like 10 or 12 or something. You talk nice and slow, so it works perfect with double speed. And then right at the end, I was like, as it got to be this morning, I was like, well, I need to get to where he is now. So what did, the last 2 videos, and I actually watched the last one, and you were talking about the previous one, and I was like, whoa, okay, this is where it's at. So I watched the only sin is
believing in sin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the one after that, and it all just like, all right, I know exactly what we're doing. And then I also felt responsible for it because you have to sit there and figure out what you're going to do and tell people what you're going to do. But like, I initiated this, and like, I feel like it was kind of my energy that like, asked you to co-create with me. So I feel kind of like the leader in it in that way. And I didn't want you to be trying to figure out what to write to people and have no idea what I was even thinking. So I wanted to send that all out there. And I can lay down that plan and be like, well, I created it, so I can like move on. And if that's what comes to be, that's great. And if not, then I don't care. I already created it. So yeah, it's been really cool.
Yeah, thank you. That feels really joyous to me. There's, I wasn't worried about it at all.
No,
I could feel the energetic current of how we were dancing together, and it's like, okay, I'm worried zero. If we pop on, look at each other, and then things come out of our mouths, it will do excellent things. So not too concerned about it. I want to give a little context for anybody who's watching this and going, okay, so what's this about? So a week ago, Carissa hopped on to my live stream. Chris and I have known each other for about 8 years, I think. I think that's about right.
Is that all? I feel like California was like lifetimes ago.
It was a few centuries ago, but by the calendar, I think we counted as 8 years. Yeah, so we haven't been interacting very closely over those 8 years, just like occasional exchanges. So last week she saw that I was doing a live stream. I even looked at it last night, but I forget exactly what the content was. But I ended up going into things having to do with the victim triangle and relating to how this compares to raising children and what it means to actually be helpful without being a rescuer, without undermining people's sovereignty in the act of offering support. And Carissa had a whole lot of really neat and resonant things to say and contribute in that, including at one point highlighting, hey, like you're using this word manipulation, but this has kind of a negative tone, and it sort of caught me and went, I did mean the negative tone, didn't I? And so I had to pause and digest that. And I actually found that really helpful right in midstream. So there's this feeling of co-creation just happening from the chats going on there. And then she mentioned a couple of times, I so want to talk to you and want to talk about all of these things, and this is exciting. And I went, I totally feel a yes to this. So let's just go with it. So so that was a lot of the impetus for that. Right after that chat, right after that live stream, she and I chatted on Facebook Messenger. And it turns out that a lot of our spiritual experiences have had a bunch of parallels in really fascinating ways.
Really crazy. And it sucks that I'm the only one to wear, because you're putting it all out there and I'm like, I'm way out there, like dancing around alone and being like, this person is dancing too, but you can't see me. And it's like, oh my God, like, no, I feel guilty that I haven't been like showing up and doing lives, which is like something that I'm going to do. And I've tried to initiate several times, but I have like school and other things that it's kind of like worst case scenario, it works, like I have to choose. And so like, you can't see me dancing out there, like on this edge that feels crazy, but like literally like building religion from the background, like being the stage hands building religion, and people are like out there, seeing religion and deciding whether or not they hate it or love it and stuff. And you're back in the background being like, this is actually like what it is and how it's created. And it's not something that you could love or hate or like or disagree with or like anything. And it's really strange that you think that it is.
Yeah, I totally understandable, but also like, it's like trying to decide whether you believe in reality or not. It's like, you can do anything you want with that. Also, it still happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Man, I want to go so many places. It's hard to like pick one.
Well, so you had given, like right before we started here, you had given me these three things of wanting to ask me something short, then second, wanting to describe something about the edge that you're at, because you feel like there's something. It sounds like there was something that you had resolved very recently that was exactly about the things I've been dancing with over the last couple of days, and I'm excited to hear about that. And then the third was something else. You had a question for me.
Yeah, so like I've kind of come to like where you are and built something and like created this thing, and then but there's this piece that I don't quite know what to make of or how it fits, and I have a feeling either you already have information, or when I build it out there and we get there, that you'll help me like put it together. But it's just this big like thing floating around that I'm like, what do you do with this? Like, what is it? It's the only moving part that I can't quite like grasp and put in like, conceptualize, I guess. And I delight every time you talk about like loving your brain and how amazing it is. I feel that way about your brain. Like it's magical. And I love it because it feels like so similar to mine, but like way more powerful on the masculine, and the ordering of the chaos, where like I dwell so much in the chaos, and then ordering it is a thing that I have to put a lot of like time into, I guess, or I have to spend a lot of time with masculine minds. So I love Jordan Peterson. I've spent like 500 hours with him, like in his videos and all of that. And like, so, you know, if people hear me say things, it sounds like something like they've heard Jordan Peterson say or something, like very possible. And I try to attribute ideas to the people they came from. But since it's like with the feminine mind and not having those boundaries, like I just absorb kind of the chaotic content, and then it just becomes part of my chaotic content. It's very hard for me to remember where things come from. It's easier with Jordan Peterson because, again, like he's a
he
very,
has a
like,
signature.
yeah, he's a significant entity in my mind. I've never spent that much time with anyone's content. So he's specifically like, I you know where a lot of my things come from. He, you know, expresses my thoughts very well. And I think you're the only other person I've met that has that particular quality, that I've spent hours with your content. We interacted with lives way before last week. Because since, you know, August, when you were doing this and I was following you with the, like, you totally changed things with the demons, the mimetic demons and all of that. Like, I love that. And I see that now, like, oh man, when my family was fighting and stuff, it was just like, demons fighting each other, you know, like, okay, like, and I remember those demons like making my life as a child like miserable and disconnected, so it was really hard, you know, but having that to like focus on that concept and to be able to communicate with that, so like that masculine mind, like creating order and creating boundaries and creating vocabulary and picking that up from other minds and putting it all together and then being able to use it and tell me where it came from and all that. I'm not good at that, but I do understand, you know. So I absolutely love your mind and I delight in your mind, and it feels so akin to mine, but like so robust in the ways that like I envy. I wish it was more robust in those ways, but I also delight in my own mind and I value, you know, what I'm capable of and what I do in contrast and identically at the same time. Yes. So do you want to get to my quick question?
Yeah. Let's do that.
So I will explain first. It feels like I'm supposed to ask you like a trick question, but that's not at all what it is. So I have been juicing for 123 days. So I am doing juice feasting and I don't consume anything but juice. And if you can imagine, like, it's a form of fasting and it creates a like psychedelic effect in a way, you know, like very often and quite consistently through almost every single day now, like I feel like I'm tripping like a lot. I am connected to things that I never even could see. I feel very like steady and like I could just see a lot more, like more levels and all of that stuff. Anyway, I did realize though, in wanting to ask you this question, that even the act of wanting to ask you the question points at the fact that I am believing something that's totally unnecessary to believe. And I need to like, realizing it chips away at it, but I would like data also to chip away at it, which is, what do you consume? Because like, what do you eat? Because in these areas where you're juice feasting and you're with people and these people are having these effects, they're like, you know, meat ruins it and food ruins it and, you know, all this stuff. And then they, you know, they fast and they feel amazing. And then they go back and, you know, in this polarity. And it's like, I realize that I've gotten into that polarity, but then also thinking like, this is a perfect opportunity to see that, like, if you eat like normal food, like if you had pizza last night and you're out there dancing along, then I can chip away like a totally unnecessary structure in my mind. So I would like to know what you consume. What do you eat?
Sure. I eat a lot of meat.
Okay. Yeah.
I do make a point of eating healthy. Like it's become very obvious to me that caring for the health of this whole foundation manifestation avatar is actually really critical. But I've experimented a whole lot with vegetarianism. I've done all kinds of arcs with different sorts of fasting. I really don't do very well on juice fasting.
Yeah, really?
My whole family leans towards hypoglycemia and
Yeah.
diabetes. So doing
No,
something like 3 months of sugar would just
right.
not do good
Well,
things.
that's exactly how I was. And I actually did 6 months of a carnivore diet and watched my insulin like repair, my insulin resistance repair through my own like ketone and blood sugar blood tests over 5 hours of fasting. And anyway,
Yeah.
but I did it like very scientifically. So for 6 months, I ate nothing but meat and butter. And I healed that. And then only then was I willing to jump completely from a carnivore diet into juice feasting. And I don't know if like the fixing the insulin resistance is what made it possible. But before that, I was completely unwilling because I had the same beliefs about myself. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. For the, so what I've discovered, like when I went to Mexico for a Bufo retreat, there was a uh, uh, I think so. It was definitely vegetarian. I think it was entirely vegan, and I think that was the longest stretch I've done, like over the last couple decades of going full vegetarian. And in the past, it would take me about 3 to 5 days to start to crash. And in this case, it was mostly fine. My body was constantly hungry, but there was but it was kind of okay. It felt like a similar hunger to fasting. So
Okay.
in that sense, and like that was happening at the same time as taking 5-MeO DMT. So like, how
Yeah.
much was
Yeah.
the veganism versus the strongest psychedelic on earth?
Yeah.
I'm betting the psychedelic had a lot more to do with it.
That's probably true. Yeah.
But the reason that they did that was because a lot of people have this thing that you're talking about this impression of eating meat creating issues and so on. But one of the big things that I got from my experiences with Bufo was a vivid recognition of like there's the attempt to get away from manifestation in the dual world is an awful lot of where the suffering comes from. That there's nowhere to get to. It's not like there's a spiritual journey that is important to be on. It's more like this is part of what I was trying to gesture towards in terms of the sin of believing in sin. That it seems like there's if the pursuit of trying to attain something spiritually is coming from a sense that there is a need to do that, as though you can fail and as though it's up to you.
Right.
That seems to be what creates suffering, which itself is not a problem,
Right.
but it sucks.
Yeah.
So the art of creating a good life seems to have a lot to do with grounding and fully incarnating. So there's something about, there are these tools having to do with fasting and like trance work, taking psychedelics, all that kind of stuff that
I
seems
like
to
that.
induce like disincarnate experiences that I think can offer some context. But for me, there's this strong desire to fully live in this world
Yeah.
and be
I like that.
connected to truth.
Yeah.
I find because of that, I care for my body mostly in the form of eating what it wants, but also tracking where the want is coming from and noticing that some of those wants sometimes loop on things that don't make sense. Um, probably the weirdest example was when I came back from Mexico, and after about a week, I had eaten some really fantastic food. I think it was like some raw oysters and salad and some like just really nice stuff that just felt very clean. And then on my walk back home, I noticed, but I'm still hungry, and there's this like and I'd been itching to have fish and chips. There was a fish and chips place on the way back to the Airbnb I was staying at. So um, I felt into that. And I went, yeah, my body really wants that. That makes no sense. Like it has everything that like my body doesn't like normally, but it really wants that. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I got some, and as I was eating it, there was this sense of this is exactly what I want, and there's something odd. And after eating it, I realized when I could feel the energetics of what was going on in my body, that the thing being satisfied was the desire to go numb. And that had come from
Yeah.
the body. Like the amount
Right.
of sensitivity that I was operating in felt threatening, sort of like the body didn't quite trust me as like its angelic host or whatever.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of going, okay, so now I know what the flavor is of the body basically being scared of
Right.
the
Right.
degree of opening and sensitivity that I am exploring. And
Yeah.
noticing that's different from a desire for a nutrient or something that would be fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I've been working with those distinctions.
I like
Um,
that. Yeah.
but I do, in terms of diet in general, I eat a lot of protein. I lean pretty heavily. I make sure that I have 3 of each things in each of my meals. I make sure I have some kind of significant protein, and especially oil if I'm going to have dense carbs. I make sure that I have something vegetative, something from plants other than grains. And I seem to need some sort of grain or starchy thing in order to maintain my metabolism in good ways. I try to avoid doing that early in the morning because of cortisol levels, like the starchy thing. Um, and because of a thing that my mother discovered, I started making a point of avoiding polyunsaturated fatty acids. And that seems to have made a pretty big difference. It was much bigger than I thought. It was actually a bigger deal than sugar. So like, okay. But I try not to be like a zealot about it. I'm just reasonably careful.
So it sounds like you do avoid like processed foods and a lot of the foods that most people like indulge in. And
Yeah. I think there's something like there's a diet of forgetting, like in a spiritual sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
And that I avoid.
Yeah.
Not because I'm ruthlessly against forgetting, but because making it so that the body fuels the forgetting seems like it does something funny that makes it hard for me to relate to the forgetting in a kind way.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, I don't want to get stuck on that for too long though. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I can talk about, I need to not. So the thing that one thing that also like, I'm going to shove in real quick because I feel like it's an interesting thing. I just want you to, anyway, it came to mind, but I want to hand it to you. I feel like if we look at just being, conceived of and then born and then growing and all of that is like an evolutionary process, like you're evolving from an infant to or from a spark and a couple cells into a person that's out there dancing on this edge and trying to figure these things out. I feel like you and like, man, there's all those things that are like the millions of ways you could react bad to this, and I don't think you will, but I could feel other people like I think that there's a thing that you're missing, which is being a parent, this level of evolution. And I think a lot of your where you're at on the edge that you feel confused about and stuff are things that I have learned through the practice of raising a child, because the answer to a lot of your questions run smoothly through my head through the pathway of how I guide my child in life. So the attunement to my child, because like when you ask about how how to not like judge people or think of them harshly and those sort of things, like the more that I am with my child and because I would love to teach him how to read and then play Magic the Gathering with him. Like I have an agenda, like I have places that I want to get us to, but he's obviously going to have to be ready for those stages when he's ready for them. And so we'll sit down and like, he wants to learn letters, but he really can't hold them in his head. So I could sit there with him with 3 different letters and we can keep talking about them. And then at some point it just slips away and he can't identify any of the 3 letters anymore. And it just like, and that's fine, but it was like 1 minute, and like, I'm sitting here with my agenda and my things to do. But my only job with him is to be his guide. And with a guide, like you just let them know when you want to do things and when you're ready to do things and like when they need to sleep or rest or eat or, whatever, like none of that's your business. And if they decide to, explore the world in a way that isn't what you expected, you're still their guide, like you're still here kind of hired to do that job. And I feel that way about every single human, like so like that that question, that answer, like where those judgments used to be when I saw people, or I was like oh god, like this person is too sexual or this person is too whatever, seeing those things, the more that I'm a parent, the more that I have this pathway of allowing people to let me know when they are ready for like some sort of my teaching, some sort of guidance from me, and then the rest of the time just being interested to see how they choose to operate, because I delight in that, watching my son and being like, wow, I really thought he was going to go this way and he went that way, or, he's not doing the thing that I expected, and just being curious and like interested in that. So I feel like, if I feel like you potentially have the ability to kind of like plug that concept in and like operate without having an actual child, but like plug it in as a a thing to build upon or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't mean to make it about like you've failed by not having children by now or anything along those lines.
I am not taking it that way
Yeah,
whatsoever.
right.
Yeah. No, I can feel the ringing of what you're talking about there. There's a little bit of a mental hesitance. Like I can see a mimetic piece that is missing,
Sure.
but
Mhm.
there's uh, but I can feel what you're talking about, and I've often found it really helpful. Like if I'm really frustrated with somebody, and I'm in this judgmental tone, there's a shift that I can make that feels an awful lot like recognizing that what is frustrating me about this person is a way in which they are basically a toddler,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
not and like there's two ways to do that, and this is part of the mimetic thing I'm talking about.
Mhm.
One way is that this person is a fucking child, and using
Right.
like you're acting infantile as like as part of the method of condemnation or part of the method of looking down. And this relates exactly to how people look at children. Like there's this very, very common thread of you you raise children basically by dominating and threatening them into behaving the way that you want them to, and then making things a battle of wills where you have more power as an adult than they do. So that's what it means to care for them. And
Mhm.
I'm being sort of brutal about it, but there's a very real thread there having to do with that's how many of these memes propagate, is by transmitting trauma through that kind of dominance pattern.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
So
so
that. Good.
yeah, so there's a lot of ideas about like what does it mean to look at somebody like a child, as
Yes.
opposed to recognizing that everyone is a child. They were a child, they've grown up, not all of their parts have grown up,
Mhm.
and interacting with the scared toddler in them or
Right.
whatever, and then being able to see that with a space of care.
Right.
So that kind of shift that feels very accessible to me. It's one that I don't use very often. And part of like one reason is I don't have a kid, so it doesn't come up as often. So
Right. Right. Yeah.
there's something very resonant with that.
Right. Right.
Um, there's there's another thing which I'm only now noticing with hearing you bring this up, going, I think you're missing this piece. I'm taking that in and I'm letting it land. But I noticed that the part that it's running into friction of is like that split point.
Yes.
Because there's
Yes.
something of you can't just pull on intuitions of how do you treat children.
Yes.
There's
Because
another move, and it's the same move I've been working with. It's
yes.
exactly the same one.
Yes. Yes. That's awesome, and that's so cool that like bringing like just in doing that one thing first, and then it brought us to exactly where we want to go. Yes. Okay, so this brings me to the thing that like I feel like if putting myself in your shoes, like I would be looking for, and that resolved for me. There, in my mind, like the way that I understand this is that society, our like conscious evolution where we've gotten to at this point, there has been a overlap and a wiring together of two things that need to be separated. Okay, so when I was a kid, my mother would say that she refrained from telling us that we were good because she didn't want the implication that we were bad, that we could be bad, that there was a possibility of us being bad, right? And like for like all of my life, it just seemed like this amazing thing that she had done for us, that like felt right and felt good and stuff. And I have realized, hold on, I need to calm this like like butterflies, man. Okay. I realized with my own child that I have to be his mother and his father, right? And I do think that those should be very like separated. I love in the continuum concept where she painted this picture of like a mother kind of being busy with the chores in the kitchen while the father is like outside doing the things. And the child is always able to come to the mother for love and support. And, if it gets injured or insecure or, anything. But then it goes out and it tries to make the father proud, right? Like, you want to be faster and stronger and like your dad, but your mom is always there to hold you. And I have to be both of those things, right? Like I have to be there for my child in the unconditional love and the agape, all of that. But I also have to create boundaries and structure and discipline and all of those things that would be the more masculine thing that I don't get to like rest in the feminine, you know, because I don't have that masculine like person around to create separation so that there's something to strive for, right? And I think that that's like, so I have to do that. And it's hard for me because I am supposed to be resting in the feminine, you know, like that's where I belong. And me personally, not like all women, but like me. So I've had to face that, right? I've had to face when my child like truly makes awful decisions, you know, like smacks me, kicks me, you know, hurts pets, you know, because he wants to get them to do something and play with him, you know, so he'll pull on their tails or, you know, hit them or whatever. And I've had to figure out how to discipline, and I didn't want to. And it came from the same place that my mom always came from of, I don't want to give you the impression that you could be bad. But I realized that what she had done with that is she had believed that I could be bad and imparted to me that that was something to be afraid of. And so what I see is that there is a crossover in my mother and in myself that I like just finally figured out and like separated between agape and choosing to do the right thing, being good versus being bad. And then this is very easily like pulled together by just looking at religion. You have God, you have, you know, the agape God, love, and then you have Jesus Christ, the archetypical, like ideal human that, you know, we've cultivated over all this time that we want to be like him, you know. And so you have to separate those things because the God, agape, will always be there, but you have to orient yourself towards being good because that's not a default. This is a default, but that's not a default. And this isn't interwoven with this. If you aren't making good decisions, you're not losing love. You're not unworthy or unvaluable. Even if you were a mass murderer, we have written into our laws that we have to treat you with respect for life that you carry. We have to, no matter how bad your decisions are. We all believe that, and we all feel that, and we have all agreed to it.
I see. So what if I was feeling into the energetics of this? So what I'm sensing is this. It is like a separation of value and fulfillment of potential.
To an extent. I think that you still are afraid of taking that fulfillment of potential too as like harsh feeling from where you are as it truly is. From where you are, it would feel too harsh to actually say good and bad, like good and evil. But those are what it is because it is separated from worthy, valuable, and love.
Okay, I don't, on the inside, I don't experience it as it is too harsh and I can't stand to go there. It's
Okay.
something more like, so something, there's actually an emotional puzzle of like, how do you go that far? Because because it doesn't actually seem like a distance. It seems like a type error. You look at like the standard modern archetype of evil is Hitler. Right? Like most people have no idea what Hitler was like or what he was doing, but like Hitler is evil. So we can take the archetype of Hitler and pretending that he is a person. There's something of maybe a more concrete manifestation of this that was showing up as a few years ago. People were having this debate about, is it okay to punch a Nazi?
Right.
Yeah. And there's something about, to me, this is a kind of a blatant stupidity, but I mean stupidity in a fairly technical sense. Like it comes from the same root as stupefaction, like to be stunned, to be numb. There's like but it does result in like lowered IQ. There's like an inability to use the mind well, or the heart, which is this like looking at somebody who has a viewpoint that you deem as evil in a way that like inspires the need to, and in this case, there's often a need to rescue. This starts to get into the Cartman's triangle stuff, but it brings in this energy of needing to condemn and destroy, or do something about, or interfere with. And this can even loop back onto you have a moral responsibility to punch a Nazi, and that it disconnects from this other side that I hear you mentioning, the bit about agape, the fact that every being is worthy of love, and that love, not it, like John Vervaeke talks about this quite a bit, that the origins of the Christian lore around agape was not just that all beings are worthy of receiving agape, but that you could participate in the unfolding of the world by receiving agape, by sending agape, so that you become the channel through which God acts.
Right.
So there's this business of it's not because it is morally required, but because it's the only sane thing to do, to love all beings unconditionally. And getting disconnected from that in order to recognize that a Nazi is evil, or that if you had a time machine, you have a moral responsibility to go back and kill baby Hitler. Like there's something about that where I don't know what it means to talk about good and evil in a way that is separate from the enactment of potential of the manifestation of agape as experienced in the relative world, as opposed to interfering with that, which to me has to do with, well, like, like that it's like an attempt to bridge what morality is. It's a connection between these two, because it's relevant that like a child has a mother and a father,
right,
not a mother also a father. Like it just so happens,
right, yeah.
like there's a connection that produced the child, right? So
right.
it seems like that bridge is really critical. So that's why I have difficulty going all the way to talking about good and evil. So I don't know what that means separate from this bit about potential.
Right. The metaphor that came to mind is like oxygen. Like we need it to survive and to breathe and to do everything good in the world, but it also fuels fire. You know, like so does fire. Fire needs it, and fire is, you know, an archetype of destruction. You know, so you know, if you say like, you know, so my child like hits me, you know, just feeling out the world, right? And again, this is like, it's easier for me to detach from like judgment of evil and stuff, because I mean, I deal with those bad choices that like corrupt agape, you know, like with something as innocent as a child, right? So I can see, and like I have become detached from and can see more clearly that like the, you know, the hitting of me, the just using bored energy to just create chaos, more chaos in the world, is like a match, you know, like fire on the end of a match that's like kind of controlled. If you don't like stop it, it's going to burn you and stuff. But like Hitler, or what you would consider evil, or the Nazi, you know, archetype of a Nazi or whatever, is like the fire burning down California, you know. They're the same thing. It's just the magnitude, you know, but it's oxygen that's fueling it, and oxygen is also fueling us, and that's agape. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't see how this is connected to the thing of you saying, like, you seem to not be willing to go far enough. I'm like,
okay, so
it's like,
yeah, right.
It's like great metaphor, but how does it, yeah.
Because, let's see. I'm gonna like leave behind the feeling of not doing it right, so that I can get to like how to actually like do it.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so I mean, maybe agape isn't the correct word. It feels like the way that you're describing slash using it, defining it, and has been defined, which I put value on, has been defined, which again, like I honor the masculine of delivering that, isn't what I'm really like going for. So like perhaps separating out just, okay, so then, I mean, I don't know if you have a better word, you go to God like I do, but like God, you know, the energy that is like the Big Bang that just keeps expanding and fractionating to the point that it's created like me as a person with a refrigerator behind me that's full of food that, you know, like has created all of that. And, you know, but it's all the same thing that's just moving, that's just constantly expanding?
I think
Wow.
the terms that boom to mind, this is coming from a very different tradition. Like you're coming from um, there's this fantastic role-playing game back from the 1990s called Mage the Ascension, which comes up with this really quirky classification scheme for different ways of dealing with whatever this thing is that is. And there's like the terms they use don't matter that much, but it created these pockets of, oh, okay, this is how we're using language to orient to it. It seems like you're coming from a predominantly like uh, the you're using the Christian language. It has this monotheistic harmony, oneness, but the multiplicity coming from the oneness kind of framework, and so it's borrowing a lot from the kind of imagery that we've inherited from Catholicism and the various bazillion fragments from there. The direction that my mind naturally goes into is more like Hermetic philosophy, which is where we get things like our days of the week and astrology and all of and alchemy. All of those things come from that kind of arc. Just because I find these bits of history fascinating, and my mind likes systems. So when I hear you talk about this, what booms to mind is, oh, I think that you're talking about the energetic contrast of Jupiter and Mars.
Okay.
Which there's actually a neat tie that goes right back to the Christian traditions. The part of the prayer, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever, amen," actually comes from a bit of a Jewish prayer. Atam malkut vegebura vegedula leolam amen. The vegebura vegedula, the power and the glory, is a reference to, like, when you map it over to the Hermetic philosophy, this is to Mars and to Jupiter. The Jupiterian energy has this quality of, like I'm hearing you describe, this vast expansion, this like possibilities opening, but it's not like it's the constant bounty and unfolding. The Ghost of Christmas Present has a lot of Jupiterian nature to him, whereas Mars, and in an important way, the Jupiterian energy is the first form in time of the unfolding, whereas the martial element is more about noticing, hey, now that we've got all these things, here are the parts that don't belong, and burn them to ash. So it's like a purification element before you actually form the creation of the soul.
Interesting.
But like this tension, like I described this tension, and I think it was in some of the videos that it sounds like you skipped over to get to today, which is fine.
Sure,
I don't expect anybody to have watched all of these. Like, that's not what it's for. But this is that tension that I've been talking about in terms of the business of being kind without undermining autonomy, or being able to stand up against what doesn't belong, and to create action in the world and draw boundaries in a way that doesn't lose sight of compassion. Like that tension is the tension line between the Jupiter-Mars spheres of this particular framework. So I'm wondering, does this touch on the thing that you're talking about?
Very interesting, but no, not at all.
Damn, okay.
No, I was trying to describe just the isness, just the place, like the observer, the isness, so like one thing that I like tried to describe to my 4-year-old, let's just explain like I'm 4. So I tried to describe to him that he always has to make choices as to whether to be doing good things or to be doing bad things, but that at any and all moments he can change those choices. So even though he like just did this thing that was bad and it was not good and it creates bad in the world, if you make these choices, if you continue to do these things, the thing that we're all like really fearing, I think burn deep into our soul, what we think we're fearing is that we're unworthy. But what we're actually like in practice like could happen would be like rejection from society. So like I want my child to make good decisions because I want him to be a nice person and not a violent, mean person, because when he wants to interact with other humans, which is necessity for his like growth and development and happiness, he doesn't want to be rejected by those humans because he doesn't make good choices. He's not oriented towards good. But at any given moment, you can reorient. So he can make bad choices, and then he can realize that he's making bad choices and he's not oriented towards good, and he can reorient towards good at any time, because there is no bad in a way that makes you any less like any less God, any less capable in the next moment of being like agape and channeling towards good. You can always change that orientation. Does that make sense?
It does. It gives me a sense of, so in your framework here, where does judgment and condemnation go?
Okay, great. I love that question. Okay, so I love looking at emotions as like a GPS. So like if I am driving down the road and then my GPS is like recalculating and then I'm like, I went the wrong way. So if I feel an uncomfortable emotion in my body, if I think about a thing and it makes me unhappy, like a not good feeling in my body, there's a not truth that I'm believing. So like I use that as a tool for myself and with other people. So if I think about my mom and like the way that she talked to me last night or the way that she did this thing and I don't like it and it doesn't feel good in my body, there's an untruth there somewhere. And if I can keep digging to find it and I see it and I shine light on it, it goes away, because it's not a truth and I know what truth is and what not truth is. So my emotions are constantly calibrating me towards truth. So that's like how I feel and view like emotions and resonance in my body, is like just this constant GPS. It's like a compass. It's constantly telling me if I'm oriented towards truth or I'm becoming disoriented. And so I feel like the concepts of what you're saying, judgment and condemnation and all of those things, are like a misinterpreted, it's this rift, this thing that I'm talking about, that is misinterpreting what's actually just your compass. So it's just orienting you towards good. So my emotions orient me towards truth, but judgment and condemnation is just my GPS telling me that I need to recalculate towards my good. But because I believe that there's a chance that I'm unworthy if I'm getting some sort of sensation that something doesn't feel correct, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to think about it. I want to put that out there on someone else. That person is doing the wrong thing. But if I realize that like, there's nothing to win or lose, there's nothing that like will condemn me or make me unworthy or anything, I'm literally just getting feedback. Like, you know, Esther Hicks talks about being at a buffet at life and you're just picking up things and going, this one isn't for me. This one isn't for me. This one's for me. So if I see like, you know, the mind as a tool, like creates avatars, this is what Jordan Peterson says, like creates avatars to live things, to try things and die so that you don't have to. So the mind is constantly like projecting into being someone else and going, nope. But all that nope means is not for me, but because we're afraid that if we were to do that thing, it makes us unworthy. We're projecting it onto that person, condemning that person, and thinking in our mind in a way, on a level, that that person is dying, instead of just realizing that like it's our mind as a tool projecting into that experience and going, that's not for me. Like it's just simply that easy. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it helps to resolve something. The flavor of it is something like the reason I asked is because of the type of energy that I read into statements like "Judge not, lest ye be judged," which is like there's a question of plausibility. Like when like, if you think of the standard thing of telling a kid to be good, if the kid doesn't have a "be good" button, all they know to do is be scared of what the adults are going to say or do in response to what the kid does. And it's like, okay, so there's something like that when it comes to like the picture that I was feeling into you describing is basically judgment. Like I was interpreting it when I held the energy of judgment and condemnation, that is always a mistake. and then something like, you shouldn't do that because it misaligns you with this. But then I was sitting there with, well, but what if that energy's there? Like, what do you do with it? Because the standard answer that I often receive, and I read into a lot of teachings and practices, is just release your judgment, which to me feels very similar to the be good button. Like,
Right. Yeah,
like
absolutely.
do what? This feels like it's more concrete, a kind of actionable, because it's describing something about the effort is not to get rid of the sensation or the signal. It is to notice that it's not judge not, lest ye be judged. That's like within the framework. That's it's more like, if you experience yourself judging and condemning yourself or others, that means you're confused.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm trying to convey. Feel,
Right.
think, believe. I'm trying to tell you.
I definitely received that. I could have started with that and gone,
Yeah,
this is what I got, and it feels like it unweaves this.
yeah,
Yeah, cool, cool.
yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and that feels like so critical, like because it's a tool to use. It's the same thing of people being afraid of their emotions, because
Oh yeah, it's
it feels
identical.
scary and terrifying, but it's like no, it's literally just orienting you towards your truth. And then, judgment and all that, it's literally just like we have to judge. Like if I take a sip of this and I judge it to be foul, I have to not drink it. Like I have to have that judgment. I have to judge it to be good to drink. Like we have to constantly discern what is good and what is bad all the time. But then we are afraid of it meaning like I'm fine doing it with this juice unless it implies that I did something wrong. And then, I'm a terrible person for like not putting it back in the refrigerator and, all of that. So
And
if
then you
I
can't
don't,
look.
yeah, then you can't look. But judgment and condemnation, those are just the feeling of not looking at the thing that's just a simple message, that's just a tool for you to actually be here and orienting yourself towards good just all the time, just reorienting. Like with my son, I every time like I have like a consequence and then he pushes past the consequence, and like gets the consequence. So like you don't get this reward or this thing is taken away from you. I immediately am giving him ways to earn it back because his job is not to have been good. His job is to orient towards good, to learn to constantly
Oh,
orient towards good. What are the tools? Like, people say like, don't force your child to apologize because they have to feel it deep inside of themselves. Like I can't make him feel it deep inside of himself, but I can teach him that when he says it, he repairs damage that he did, and that's what he actually wants to do. So like by practicing apologizing, because I've told him and I've made him in a way, I've made him do it even though he doesn't feel it, he will learn that when he does that thing, it repairs the damage that he did. And then when he wants to repair damage, he will know how to do it by saying, by being, I call it being humble because I don't have a better word for it, but by apologizing, so I think that, and a lot of the ways that like we've raised children and stuff is this consequence that means that you have done not good enough and you have not been good, as if that was like finite or done in some sort of way. But the point of actual life is just constantly oriented towards truth, constantly oriented towards good, and recognizing the signs that you're not orienting towards good, that you've oriented towards well, it's not even orienting towards bad. Bad is just the thing that happens. It's like I'm either driving on the road or I'm not driving off the road, but I'm not driving on the road anymore. Like the off road is coming into what I am driving now, but like the point isn't to be like, stop the car, you've ruined it, get out of the car, you're not fully on the road anymore, you've ruined everything, you don't get a car anymore. Like, no, just
or
get
even
back
worse,
on
you
the road.
had swerved off the road several miles back, and that means you have failed, and that will
Yeah,
always
yeah.
be in your past.
Yeah, exactly. But that feels like, in those moments, and even maybe looking back on it, like concentrated in time is this feeling of like the end of something, but it's not, because you're going to get in another car and drive. And the point is just to always like keep paying attention to where the road is, you know, like you should just always be doing that. And like sometimes you're going to mess it up, and then you get better at making sure you pay attention to the road, you know, like maybe you're texting and like you start to go off the road, and like you know, you knew you shouldn't be texting, but now you really know you shouldn't be texting, you know, like you reorient just constantly. But you have to like separate those two, the worthy and all of that. You're always worthy of, and not like, I don't know if worthy is, you just always are, and you always are part of the whole human race. Like it doesn't matter if you've been like terrible and making bad decisions and all these people hate you, like you can move and change it. I mean, people do it all the time, right? Like I've met several people who lived lives just completely disoriented towards chaos and doing anything and everything that they felt like it, and ended up in jail. And then someone came and visited them and gave them a Bible, and they had nothing better to do than read and like decide that they didn't want to live their life oriented towards chaos, and religion gave them a way to orient towards good, the archetype of Jesus, and the idea that somebody loves you and somebody cares and somebody's there with them all the time, and they reoriented towards good, and now they make their choices through that reorientation towards good. Like you can live in chaos at any time, and you can reorient towards good at any time. And that's the whole like, oh, I could do all this horrible stuff and then just go sit in a, you know, confession box and wipe my slate clean and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you know, I mean, you can, because, you know, but
although
at the
if you've
same
been
time,
off-road for a long time, it may take you a while.
When you find a road, you get on a
Yeah.
road and you stay on a road, you know, but you can off-road anytime and then just get back on a road. But it doesn't make you any less, you know, of a human. It doesn't make you any less deserving or real, or, you know, like any lower than anyone else, or like any of those things that we seem to like carry deep within us that are some sort of implication. Because if you're just observing the moment and you're receiving the feedback of what it is that you're putting out into the world, it does kind of feel like that. You can ruin a relationship, and that relationship could be just done, you know. You could also give it time and space and reorient, and when you go back into the potential for that relationship, you can be oriented towards good and be a different person, and you could repair things, you know.
Yeah. There's for me a kind of there's a fascinating question that this brings up, which it might be way too big for us to dive into at this point. But I noticed this dances with a piece that keeps coming back for me as a way to, basically a way to keep me humble confused. Which I distinguish that between like the type of confusion that is the mind being stuck in a loop and it's just doing this computation processing that goes in a circle. There's something of this has void flavor, but it also has some of the loops in it. It's like, okay, well, I'm wanting to sort that out.
Yeah.
But the essence of it is something like, it's like the language fails because I'm then going, well, it's like from the non-dual perspective, there aren't perspectives. There's just non-duality. But anyway, I guess a short way to say it is, why is there a distinction between road and not road?
I think
like
the same why there's a distinction between truth and not truth.
Sure, and I think importantly, those are the same thing.
Yeah, right.
Right, but there's still something about how like, it's almost like truth was the first thing to manifest or something like that. And that there's something eternally before that, which has this whole blending of the whole thing. And there's a question of, well, why? Why
I think it's chaos and order. I mean, I think in the, you know, the concept of expansion is chaos. Like, okay, so, you know, when we, especially when we're growing and our brains are forming, like if you take a child or a kitten, they did the experiment with kittens, but that is, you know, growing and developing like neural pathways. And then at night you play like erratic noise or white noise with erratic sounds or whatever, so that they can't actually go into like a full sleep. They can't prune the pathways in their brain. So like our brains are constantly like creating pathways and learning all of this stuff. And then at night when we sleep, the pruning, right? So that it's like chaos and then the order of like ordering all of that. And I think that that's like, part of this in a way is like there's always the expansion in a chaotic way, and then there's like ordering it, and you can like if you're trying to order what isn't actually like there, it's not actually like accurate, then you've strayed from truth. And if you're not ordering at all, then you're coming up against chaos. You know, you're creating chaos, you're perpetuating chaos instead of helping contribute to like order. But
Right.
order,
Well, I guess what one way to highlight this is something like whence come the problemness of that? Like that problemness only exists within order. There's an important way in which chaos is more true.
yes, yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think that that's kind of time. Like the future is chaos. It hasn't happened yet, and it could be anything. And then the present is like, you know, the part of the Ziploc bag that's like taking the openness and turning it into the closed thing, and order is the closed thing behind it.
Yeah. You know, I'm noticing, I'm feeling into what my mind is trying to do with this, and I'm noticing the way that my mind wants to spin and go, and then there's these things and these details, but it's sort of disconnecting from the energetic core that I'm more interested in sitting with.
Yeah.
I feel like you came here with a gift, and I'm receiving that, and I'm feeling that digest in my system. That's something like I think a pretty good summary of like a lot of the efforts of my life is I have been looking for a compass and a manual.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been slowly piecing together, okay, I think, is this a compass? I think this works. And I got large pieces of it. And you coming in saying, yeah, but your needle's stuck here. Try pulling this chunk of dirt out of this part, and now the compass can swing. And like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I think
And there's
it's
a
more
question
like,
of why the hell is there north? Where is magnetic north coming from such that the compass even works? And that to me is a relevant question, and it's interesting, but it's distracting from the integration of, hey, the compass works now.
yeah.
And wanting to
Yeah.
digest that and sort that in and feel into
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I think you know, when you were asking that question, it I am a guide, but I am also a person who is being guided by like you and like anyone who is essentially like thrown into my path, you know. But like the question of like guided where, you know, like I know, you know, I hear it in all of your videos and that drive that you have. And like I had to contend a while ago with the feeling of like how big I want to be, like how big I know I am, and when I am seen, how big I will be, and it will be obvious. Like the concept of like Oprah, you know, like the concept of how big Oprah feels in our society, and like the feeling like not being afraid to own that like I'm not in a rush, and I know that like when I've reached the end of my life, I will have made the kind of impact that feels as big as Oprah. Like that is where I'm orienting. And when I'm not paying attention, when my so I don't think that your compass was stuck and I needed to unstick it. I think it was communicating to you, but you didn't know that that's what it was communicating, because when it was communicating to you, it sounded like the wrong kind of noises that you don't like, and you thought that you were supposed to not like those noises because of this stick, like this thing. And when you separate those two things, then you don't have that like fear that comes with that stick, and you can hear that noise like in a way that tells you, you know, like hot, cold, you know, like if you're going the right way or not the right way. And you can can like identify that what you're doing, it's just like feeling of the feelings in your body. I'm avoiding these things. I know I shouldn't feel these bad things. And you're like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, I actually feel relief hearing you describe that. It felt like my metaphor was off. For me, like one of the recurring puzzles I just keep encountering like over and over again, which is what a recurring puzzle is, is when I'm orienting towards something and I'm trying to enact, and especially when it feels inspired, like, okay, man, I really want to write this essay or something like that, and then I encounter resistance. Is the resistance because of old programs that are in my blind spot that are running in me, that this direction is actually going to dissolve or run through or sort out? Or is it because I misunderstood and I'm actually getting stuck in one of those programs, and this is reality telling me, hey, you have like that is not truth. That direction is not truth. You need to back off.
Right.
And the reason that's a puzzle is because the answer to one is to bowl through, and the answer to the other is to stop and take stock.
Mm-hmm.
And on the inside, they feel identical.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
Okay.
and but this feels like you're that is exactly this distinction that you're talking about. If
Mm-hmm.
oh well the and this has been a recurring theme in this, which is something like this energetic fear that like it keeps coming up, and I cut it down, and then it grows, and then I try to pull out some roots, and I discover, well, the roots run deeper than I thought, and it regrows. I'm like, okay, this is great. But this this fear of getting my plan wrong,
Yeah.
that I think is the pretty constant theme that creates this specific friction.
And you refer to it so often as should, and you're trying so hard to detach from shoulds.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right.
exactly.
Yeah. I see exactly where you are. Okay. So this is like one of the most amazing conversations I've ever had in my entire life, just so you know.
Great.
Okay.
This is part 2 of 3.
This is awesome. Okay. So we have God, we'll call that the isness, right?
I want to pause just very briefly. So there's a bunch of comments that have been coming in.
I had to turn off my phone because there was like one time I looked down and I was like, oh, somebody said something. And then I was like, and like I had like just the flash of things like boil up, and I was like, oh, this is a terrible idea. I'm listening here. Like, no, phone off. No, thank you.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's a part of me that I'm used to doing it in the mind. I'm working on doing this more in the heart of tracking everyone that's involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, we totally.
But yes,
do that.
anyway, but most of these comments I've been thinking, when we get to a natural pausing point, we can go to those. But this one feels timely, which David Swedlow saying, do you notice that they stop feeling identical eventually? I think it's directed at me of like these two versions. And the short answer is yes, but in my lived experience, usually this is because I see the results and I discover whether I guessed right or not. Mm-hmm. And the in the moment before, there's a glimmer of something, and I think that this is what Carissa is talking about. But the challenge that I've long had is that my mind is both very clever and very fast. So it starts to notice the pattern structures and then try to do a mental replication of the compass to sort out that distinction.
Yeah.
When that happens, it becomes very easy for me to not notice that I'm just using my mind to orient. And I think that this thing that you're talking about, Carissa, isn't in the mind at all. The mind is sort of the thing that interprets afterwards. And the entire point is that, like with the judgment thing, the thing about judgment and condemnation is the mind having run with an interpretation of a feedback, mm-hmm. And being mistaken while that feedback is saying, no, that isn't what I meant. And if I just listen to the thoughts, then I can be stuck in this position of using those feelings as confirmation of the thoughts. And if the thoughts are going, I don't know what to do, and the panic I feel feels like confirmation of that thought, then I can get this affirmation of, yeah, I don't know what to do. But just setting the thoughts completely aside and going, look, the computer is in a loop and it doesn't know what it's doing, but I can feel what's going on. There is some sense in which I'm feeling the rumble of the wheels rolling off of the pavement, and then we're now hitting the gravel on the side of the road.
Right.
Like that feels like
it's
something.
Only for that avatar. You know, you see one person and they do one thing and you judge them. And if you can disconnect from that and like start upgrading that software where you're like, all this judgment means is that I wouldn't want to do that. That's not right for me. You know, so
that's been super my experience.
And then you have the differentiation, which is like me and that person are two different people on two different paths. And if you can do that, then you don't have to have the feedback, because when you're attached to all of that, when you lack that differentiation. So you feel like that person, like without having any conscious awareness of this at all, the avatar that you're projecting of yourself into that person feels like you're the one making that decision to do that thing, and you feel how wrong that feels to do that thing. And then you are feeling the wrongness. That feels like judgment and condemnation because it's the wrong thing. You're not the person doing that thing. There's differentiation there. That person is doing that thing.
Although I think it's really important to track the fact that when that's happening, I think, so I certainly experience it this way, and I think this is pretty general. When that's happening, it works in part by not looking like that's what's happening.
Yes.
So it's very hard to see, I am projecting my avatar into that person, and like, because if you could see that, then it would dissolve the entire function.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of, when I was talking about a compass and a user manual, to me, the user manual part is speaking to the lived inside experience of somebody in the midst of confusion, recognizing what would somebody who is confused need to hear. Often the answer is just truth. But sometimes, because of the nature of the confusion, truth gets actively misinterpreted by exactly the confusion. So the thing, one of the main tools that I'm taking from this is, and I feel like I've been making steps in this direction. This feels like it's like it's like growing an alternative plant to go down and start getting those roots. It's like, this is cool, which is this this bit about noticing this energy of, it's not even energy of judgment. That's even a step later. It's like this energy of no, which can know together with a kind of fear, like a trying to get away from, like taking that, especially the moment it becomes directed, whether it's directed outward at others or it's directed at parts of me, and to notice that when that moves, that means I'm confused. And like so that's a bit of software upgrade, like I'm hearing you talk about, like that, putting that in, creating a what I imagine is the initial steps will be noticing this in more depth. Like I've been shifting in this direction, but it had a kind of moral tone, like it's really important for me to ground in the experience of my body and to stop getting distracted by my mind quite so much. But that wasn't addressing the inside of the software. And I knew that, but it was like, eh. But what this is doing is adding a piece inside the software so that as it goes through a few of these loops, it will simplify until in the midst of it, the thing that you're talking about becomes very active. I've seen this in bits and pieces where I notice, even in the work that I've been doing, of just going, basically trying to use concentration meditation to orient back to the body, that there's an opening to the other that becomes a lot more accessible, such that I don't even need to concentrate. There's more of an inclination to feel the flash of judgment and then feel compassion for the person. So what I'm imagining, just seeing sort of the mental programming, sort of like taking this bit of software, you put in this program and you sort of simulate running it forward in time. I can see how this would result in that phenomenon, not only deepening, but also skipping the part where the projection actually lands on the other person. Instead, it feels like, instead of wham, I just punched this person, oh, I guess I'm angry. Instead, feeling the fist cock and then going, something's going on. Or even just a muscular tension or breathing hard.
Right.
I can see where that would dissolve the program very quickly.
Yeah, and it ties together with the, emotion, because we're, the two different compasses. You've got, emotions in the feeling in your body is orienting you towards truth, and then you have the judgment and condemnation kind of mechanism that orients you towards good, because I mean that's a necessary mechanism in humankind. Like, I have to form my child to be able to work with other humans. Like, I have to help him learn that. Like, if I was a guide and I took you out on a raft to go, down, and I didn't teach you how and tell you what is bad to do, I would be a terrible guide and you would probably die. You know, like that is not a good guide. Like a guide has to help you orient and help you like figure out what the bad behaviors are and help you understand how to make good decisions. And that's what we all do for each other all the time. So I had to.
Here I'm noticing, I think there's a part that I skipped over that I think like I'm noticing, oh, you're emphasizing this thing. I think I didn't receive that before.
Yeah.
And I'm now staring at this going, okay, I think I'm still not receiving it.
Right. So
let me do you know the part?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Great, go for it.
I'm going to build too. Okay. So okay. So you know, from one perspective, like everything is a buffet. Like part of the beauty of life is realizing how you are an individual human being. And like, you know, when you go to a buffet with other people, like they're gonna like different things than you like, and it's fun to explore and to see what is for you and what is not for you, because the more that you do that, the more you become you, which is like kind of what I guess maybe that you could say that that's what it's all orienting to. Because if you look at it as like we're all the isness, but then we're like sectioned off parts, like what other purpose is there but to become more of your part, like a more concentrated part of your part?
Yeah. Okay. So I is this like the distinction between like orienting to truth versus orienting to like and dislike?
I think like and dislike is we need to find like a better way to consolidate it, but the judgment condemnation mechanism, like and dislike is in that one. So there's the emotion one, and then there's the like and dislike, condemnation, judgment, the discerning, the one that's constantly filtering and reacting. I can see a color, like I look at this color on my wall and I like feel this amazing like feeling in my body, and when I look at red, like I don't feel a good feeling in my body.
Right. So,
and there's something about that that's me, like personal to me, and created from whatever I'm created from. But like if God and isness is like, this doesn't work, but an ocean, and then like, you know, a cup from the ocean is the me in there, like I'm different from the ocean in those particular ways, and I have different things, and I may have more fish poop than you know another cup. I'm just different, you know. So you know, understanding like, you know, the isness kind of fractioning off to have all of these different kinds of experiences, but experiencing why my experience is different from your experience is part of the entire reason that I'm not you.
Right. So here there's this loop that I keep getting caught into.
I got off of the path that I was on to get to the thing you're asking.
The particular thing that I'm getting caught by is I don't see how. So there are two things I want to say. One is that there's some sort of precision that you're trying to add where you're sort of hesitantly saying, well, the like and dislike thing is kind of, it is within the judgment mechanism, but that's not its essence. Like you didn't say it that way, but that's what I got from you, is that's not its essence.
It's more its essence than the jealousy condemnation thing. I think there is a deeper essence to it though.
Okay, so I think that I haven't understood the essence yet. And the second thing that I think is closely related to this.
For the record.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But there's something you get about this that I can tell I don't.
Yeah.
And the closely related to this is I don't understand how it is a separate thing from truth. So like to the one way that I look at the I think it's mirrored from how you're doing it, the condemnation thing, or the judgment condemnation mechanism, whatever name, the discernment, I think is another term used for this, the discernment thing. One way I can boil this down is I think what we're talking about is, well, this is the closest thought I have, and it's failing to capture the essence of what you're talking about. So I don't actually think this, but this is the best theory I currently have, which is that I think we're talking about the body. When there's incarnation. That's what individuation is. That's what it is to be in time. It's like being incarnate, being this entity, and not being this computer or this cup, or like it's being this. And what it means for a biological entity to be there. Like this is the same move I made with means. Like the thing that makes an entity a being is the way that it has what amounts to self-repair, self-preservation, self-exaltation mechanisms that try to keep itself going, like towards things that it registers as good for its continuation, and away from things it registers as bad for its continuation. And these have, as close as you can make anything objective, it's that's what that means. That's what good and bad means.
Right.
So the so with that, I can track things like, yeah, I look at the color and do I get a yum feeling or a yuck feeling? And why would color be for the body's register? Well, you know, the body is very complicated, like billions of years of figuring out stuff, and also this particular unique genetic mix, yada, yada. So that part I can look at and go, okay, I can make sense of that and how the body's, and I don't have a tidier, I feel like the word preference is too weak. But but craving has an extra element to it that I don't want to add. But there's something about the thing that moves the body towards some things and moves the body away from others. It's like what this animal that I am in, that I'm writing, that I'm the steward of, whatever. That's like its basic programming that is my individuation. That makes sense to me. But the thing is that I experience all of that as being within the dome of what is true. So this thing of distinguishing between truth and what is or isn't for me, I don't understand how those are different.
Well, what I was getting at was that they like overlap in a way, because like if I, you say that you do a thing and that like reacts that like judgment, condemnation like mechanism in me, and I feel like disgust, like that's a bodily thing, like I feel that, and
Yeah.
and that rift, that thing that needs to be separated, always created that to feel the negativity of judgment, so you say that you do a thing and then I feel disgust and like kind of pull away from you, but that comes from the if then unworthy. If you
Sure.
do that, then unworthy. If I were to do that, I would be unworthy, and that all pulls that, and that's the untruth. That's the thing I'm feeling in my body, that's actually just a mechanism that's telling me that I'm believing something that's untrue. I'm believing now on some level that you/I are unworthy, because I just had the experience of an avatar of the two of us combined doing that thing, and feel from myself that it's not
Right.
good thing, because it's not a good thing for me, but it's not a good thing for the Mui that we just created. I just created. And then that part like doesn't resonate. So we're not on the right path, and I don't like it, and I don't feel good in my body. So in a way, like they do overlap, and they are kind of the same, in the same way that you and I are the same, and we are also separate. It's also
Okay.
right.
So let me, so there is a distinction. So there was a distinction I was tracking that that later it's like I was cutting it this way and then you cut it this way, and I went and I'm confused because I'm cutting it at a different angle.
Yeah.
So I find myself wanting to describe the cut so that we can like compare what this distinction is.
Let me share one quick metaphor real quick. When coming to that, like, the way that those things have to be mushy, like in the same way that like time is happening in our minds because of our conditioning, like in a linear way where the past is behind us and the future is in front of us and those things. But at the same time, it's happening simultaneously. Like there is a part of me that knows what it feels like to be in my future. And there are a lot of parts of me that knows what it feels like to be in my past right now. And it's all happening simultaneously. And they're two completely different realities that you can tune into. So like, I want to assert like a metaphor of like a radio station. Like we're going to like dismiss like satellite radio for now and just say that like, if I get in my car and I turn on the radio and you're sitting in the passenger seat, like, and I say, I'm going to turn on the radio, you know what I mean. And I can turn that to any channel on an FM station that I can receive, but I can also turn it to any AM station that I can receive.
Mm-hmm.
And they both exist simultaneously, and they both are like equally us listening to the radio, and we agree with that and we understand that. But if I'm on the FM station, the AM station doesn't come through and doesn't make any sense. But if I'm on the AM station, the FM station doesn't come through and make any sense. But they both exist simultaneously and they both are the radio. So like that feels necessary for like, you know, emotion and discernment as two different ones. Like you can tune to one, you can tune to the other. They can both play the same, you know, kind of tune simultaneously if you go back and forth through them, you know, but you can't really be on like both at the exact same time because they're different, but they're both the radio.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this totally makes sense. Where I find myself wanting to go to continue the metaphor is to understand what AM and FM are, such that they can coexist, and what the radio is doing to interact with them. That feels like a resolution to the question, even though you can't play both at the same time.
Yeah.
So, what I'm the distinction that I'm making there is, so the kind of model I was running with up until I went, whoa, I think I didn't receive something core to what you're saying, was it sounds like the body's yum yuck response is tuned to truth that is relevant to me. And so there's a way to use the body's compass, I mean, certainly to notice this is for me, that's not for me. And that's the channel through which I can receive truth that is also beyond me, because if it's beyond me, then I'm going to relate to it somehow. Right? So in that sense, it's all about discernment, but this, like, that's implicitly going to bring in things about, am I on the road? Because whether I'm on the road is a fact about the road, but it's a relevant fact to me.
I think okay, so if you're driving down the road and like say you're on a super long car trip and you're just like in the zone and you're doing it for forever, and then you look up and you see like, not you look, I mean you're looking, and there like comes into view like a sign that says like, you know, this highway, you know, it'll say like this highway to like this major city that's like 150 or 500 miles out. And you instantly have that feeling of like, I am not driving to that city. Like, am I even on the right? Like, you know, so I think that's discernment. Like it's reading the road signs. Whereas emotion is like, am I off the road? Like, am I off the road? You know, like, am I going somewhere terrible that's going to hurt me and I should be terrified? I can feel those things in my body. But discernment is like reading the road signs and going, I don't want to turn down that exit. I don't want to turn down that exit. And it's like somebody else, you know, like, you know, I tend to have more reactivity with my own mother, right? So like if I'm riding in the car with her and then she's like, and she tends to be the driver, you know, I'm driving and if she's the navigator or whatever, and she like looks up at a sign and she's like, oh, this exit, like, should we go, you know, is it we're going here and we should go this way? Or I take this route for whatever. And my initial reaction is like, no, I like, that is not the right way. That's not a good way. Cause it's not where I'm going right now, you know, like, but she's, you know, like I feel upset with her because she's telling me about this route that I should be taking. Like that kind of, you know, reactivity or whatever can be applied there, but it's the discernment is more like reading the roadsides and knowing whether or not it's the appropriate place to go for your path and where you're headed, versus whether or not you're on the road or in danger of coming off the road or in oncoming traffic.
So what I would say then is that you're describing discernment as a mental function.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't judgment and condemnation feel like a mental function?
Not the way that I meant it originally. I was talking about a type of energy. Like there's definitely thoughts that come with it, but I can find myself judging a person and not knowing why.
Right,
but the reason I know it is because of a way that it feels.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. I mean, it still feels differentiated from the body. Like you said, energy, and energy felt in the body would be emotion. Does it feel like emotion? And when you say feeling energy, I mean
something a little more general than emotion, but if that's how you're using the word emotion, I'm happy to run with that.
Well, no. I think we need to pick it apart a little bit more because like I said, when confused, it becomes emotional, right? Okay.
So I'm starting to see some of the pieces of, we're using these specific words a little differently. I enjoy you.
Okay.
And let's dig into that. Okay, so Uh, so the word emotion often has a very glop. Like my mom would use the term glop terminology, like a word that sort of splats around a bunch of different meanings and kind of squishes depending on the context in a way that like it doesn't coherently mean anything.
Mhm.
Um, the emotion has a bunch of that kind of quality. The word emotion does.
Right.
But there is, for instance, a distinction that I have that I encountered first from the Enneagram um, of the word distinction that they tried to make with this is between emotion and feeling. I find that to be annoying because they're both used almost the same way in colloquial use, but there is a distinction here that is helpful. One type, what they were calling emotion, is the sort of reactive thing that is largely based in the body. I would say that there's a kind of energetic thing. I think this matches the thing that you're talking about an energy felt in the body that sort of compels, like anger or excitement, or like these are very personal in a particular way. They're fundamentally reactive.
Mhm.
There is another type of thing that, um, if for lack of better terminology, I can describe the phenomenology in more detail. But there's a type of thing that is felt more like a field where the heart is sort of the sense organ for that field. Examples are things like kindness. When you feel kind, as opposed to the kindness being about you, like look at how kind I am, look at how nice I'm being. That's an emotion in this sense. But kindness and the being of kindness that comes through
Mhm.
isn't personal at all. But I would still say it's felt in the body. That's part of what I'm highlighting about. Well,
Yeah, it's sensed.
yeah, and also
Yeah.
things like victimization. The victimization in the sense of the victim triangle only works because there's a bunch of energy that is pumped through the mind. The mind creates these interpretations and these confusions and these projections, but the act of doing that creates a net experience that is sensed in the body in a particular way.
Mhm.
Um, I could call that emotion, but victimization isn't an emotion exactly. It's more like a mood or a tone. It's a
Okay.
flavor.
Yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying, and I appreciate you making that more specific, the vocabulary, and putting a little more order into what was creating chaos.
Cool.
Masculine mind organizing
Yeah,
beautifully too. Very well.
this masculine mind does the ordering entirely on its own. It just sort of
I
shows
know.
up and
Yeah.
said, "Here's this." Like,
Yeah.
okay, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. Well, they both do. I mean, everything does, I guess, and that's what we're getting at, right? That's where we're
Yeah.
coming to. And that kind of like, let me go there, I guess, because that goes back to the crux of what you were talking about. I'm not sure how much more progress we could make on what we were talking about. I need to organize a little bit more of feeling and emotion. That's definitely like the leading edge. Like I said, I don't either like know some of that. I do a bit. I feel like you were asking, there was, anyway, that's lost for now.
I mean, yeah,
Okay.
I have no trouble tracking where we were and how we got there. So if it's helpful for me to provide that, I can. But I can
No,
hold
it's
on to
okay.
it, and we can
I
bring
don't
it in
think it's,
later.
yeah, yeah. I don't
I'm
think,
interested in like your energy just went somewhere, and I want to follow
yeah,
that thread.
yeah. I, I love that. So there was it helps. Okay. So I, like I said, I've listened to hundreds of hours of Jordan Peterson, and I was not compatible until relatively recently because I did join like a church group, even though I don't consider myself religious, and I still don't, even though I've begun like researching religion essentially. So it just provides like maps that provide vocabulary, which is something I really love about listening to you, because you get stuck in the problem that I do all the time. Like, I guess we're gonna call this God. Like, so like of that vein. So to me it feels like this is God and Jesus, like God is isness, and it's everything, and that the good, the feeling of love and all of that, and I'm going to take those two back. I'm going to put them over here, the good and all of the good and the bad. The good versus bad is Jesus. It's the archetype. Are you aligning with what you consider like your archetype? Like, I'm going to do a workshop with people, and one of the first things I'm going to do is have them create an archetypical avatar. And then when pulling them through other things, I'm going to have them reference their archetypical avatar. So for me, my archetypical avatar was my higher self. That's what I called my archetypical avatar. And then I can understand when I'm like in my Bible study and they're talking about Jesus, they're talking about their version of Jesus, which is their archetypical avatar. And
Yeah.
that's what they use as that name. And like, I feel
Yeah.
like if Jesus is a real guy and he's just glad I have my archetypical avatar that is made of the same stuff that everybody who studies the Bible and says his name is Jesus, and he loves that just as much as being called Jesus and from the
Yeah.
Bible. Like,
I think that for
otherwise
the
he's
most
not an
part,
archetypical avatar, is he? You know?
right.
So
Right. I think that
anyway,
secretly, this is the same thing that basically everybody means when they're talking about their higher self.
yeah.
And there's a kind of, from what I can tell, I don't know how universal this is, but it's shockingly more universal than I would have expected. One of the major spiritual pivotal points for me was having an embodied experiential recognition that I am my higher self,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that higher self is taking care of a mortal
Mm-hmm.
animal that is very confused and knows how to talk about the higher self.
Yeah. So you are the guide and you are the guided all
Yeah,
simultaneously. Yeah.
yeah. So
Exactly.
just wanted
So
to note that because there's like a very
yeah.
strong bridge there. Anyway,
Yes.
carry on,
Yes.
unpause.
So you have these two, right? You've got God and you've got Jesus. And so like I haven't read the Bible, but Jesus, Jordan Peterson, not Jesus, describes that in the progression of the Old Testament to the New Testament, you go from God walking through the garden with Adam, like you pictured like two men walking side by side, like God walking alongside, like they go for a walk together in the garden. And you know, over time, that representation of God like appearing before people and just coming down to earth to like talk to you and all of that stuff like starts to dissipate into, I can't remember, I think it may be the Abrahamic stories where you know they talk about Abraham, either Abraham or Moses. They both lived for so friggin' long. I don't know where it is, but at some point in the New Testament, it's referred to as walking before God. And I really feel this like that AM FM switch over, creating a bridge. Actually, like it feels like a map of a bridge being created to me, of God being a differentiated thing and then being absorbed into people, like person kind, like humans, and then kind of being the like I've been describing it as like the wind beneath the wings, you know. So like now you're the person and like you, it's kind of, but it's like that's what being raised by parents is too, you know, like they are the ones that hold you and take care of you and are there like physically with you all the time, and eventually they just become like a part of you and you go off and live your life, and an avatar of them, or you know, like that what they have created in you is what lives in you, and you can kind of discern like what would make them proud and who you want to be based on what they put in you. And that could have really messed things up, but you know, ideally it helped orient you towards good and towards yourself, you know, like that's what we strive for, especially in like our generations that are trying to really consciously raise children, of like orienting them towards themselves instead of orienting them towards our ideals. But the idea that like you're kind of fueled by the spirit of God, you're fueled by, you know, the spirit of the people who raised you, who got you this far. And so I've been feeling that way through life, this concept of walking before God. That's the best way that I can describe it. Like, I wish I had a better way, but that's the best way that I can describe it.
Is this like God is behind you?
It's kind of like God is behind me. That's
Okay.
the feeling. I mean, and it kind of comes to like a physics kind of feeling of like, if you're aiming something and orienting to something and you don't know where you're aiming or what you're orienting to in front of you, there has to kind of be something like behind you. It's the, you know, the constantly judging like what I have done or what has happened, if that makes sense. God kind of in that perspective kind of feels like what I have created behind me. Like I'm looking at my wake to make a judgment about like whether or not I'm oriented correctly, or I need to adjust my aim, where it is that I'm orienting myself towards good, towards me, towards my higher self, towards the best of me. But the concept of it's an energetic like force. So you have the shoulds and you have the mind and you have the decisions and you have the ability to like pledge 100 days to a thing and to follow through with it and have willpower and to do those things. But you are made of different forces, and those different forces win out at different times and like change you, what decisions you actually made or what actions you actually commit to and follow through with and all of that. And I have begun like living my life in a way that I'm just like curious and interested to see what it is that like I actually do or accomplish. And I don't feel attached to it, nor do I feel like anything could be worthy or unworthy of anything. Like it's just I I I am me, you know, like I am me. And even if I like don't get off of the couch all day, which does not feel anywhere near the definition of me, because I'm an extremely conscientious industrial person, like to a fault. Um, so even if I'm orienting to my best good that I can possibly imagine and constantly adjusting, I can just sit back and like watch myself and see what it is that I accomplish and what it is that I do. And then I'm constantly, it's like my job now is more to look at the wake, to look at what has happened and see the God in it, rather than judge where the God would be if I aimed forward, if that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
not my responsibility. I don't have the answers. There's something else that enlivens me, that makes me breathe, you know, like I don't do that. Like there's something else that makes me decide like I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm like, well, that's going to make me late, you know, like but here I am doing this thing and I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this thing, I should just scrap doing this thing because I'm going to be late. And I'm like, well, I continue to do this thing, so there must be something important, because there are more forces and more behind like what it is that like I want things in the future. Like there are things that I want. Like I want to have a like particular kind of masculine partner. I want to have that partner like really want to have children with me. I want to have that partner be like the ideal person to raise children with. Like I want that partner to be like all of these particular things, and I want to feel like this particular kind of person when I get there. I also want to be Oprah, you know, like I'm just going to use that as like a gross term to like, I also want to be like this big and make, and not like because I want to be seen as that big, but because in the same way that like when my child has a question or needs something, I want to be able to answer that question. And in the same way that when I'm on an edge and my mind says, what was that movie? What was that person that, weren't you watching videos sometime that like by Jordan Peterson, you know, it's always going to be my guy. Like, wasn't that? And then I'm like, well, I'll take that as like divine inspiration. You know, I'll take that as something like a breadcrumb, and I'm going to go follow that. And like, I want to have like the fact that you do these videos, that he has put out so much of his content for free that I could just go find. And then it changes me in such substantial ways, contributes to my life, my child's life. I have healed my family so much, can change all of this because he just created and put stuff out there and it's there for me. That is what I am and what I will do. And it's not because I want to be like recognized or seen or worthy or any of those things. Like those already exist for me. It's just that I know that I have benefited from other people creating and being themselves out loud, like you doing what you've done, and especially in the past 100 days, because your August stuff was really, really, really interesting and really, really fascinating. But the way that you've been showing up in like this past 25 days has been like life-changing for me, because I don't think that I had any awareness that anybody could dance off in the darkness, you know, like in the unexplored territory with such like similar like openness and reckless abandonment and detachment, which are all things that like I highly, highly value about myself, that I didn't think that I mean, it just didn't even cross my mind that like I wasn't like the only person out there doing that, you know. But I mean, I know that other people are out there exploring their territories, but I didn't know that someone's territory could like resonate with mine, you know, so much and like be so similar to mine.
Quick note, we got a cute comment.
Oh,
David Swidlow says the next Oprah is a Sangha.
what does that mean?
Oh, you don't know okay, there's this phrase, the next Buddha will be the Sangha, and Sangha is like community. It's a suggestion that there's this legend of how Siddhartha Gautama was actually the fourth of 5 Buddhas. And the reason we know about Siddhartha Gautama is because each Buddha shows up basically after the last Buddha's teachings have been forgotten. So in a bunch of Mahayana traditions, they say Maitreya, it will be the 5th one, is sort of hovering as a as a bodhisattva ready to reincarnate in order to guide people through the fifth Buddhic age. But there's been this phrase that's been hovering around. I don't know who originally coined it, but saying the next Buddha will be a Sangha, where Sangha is, it originally started out as the priesthood class in Theravada Buddhism, but it's come to mean the Buddhist community that is a spiritual community for helping everybody in there to go along the spiritual path. And
I
so,
love that.
yeah, so the next Buddha will be a Sangha, is then getting worked into the next Oprah is a Sangha.
Yeah, and I love that. I don't disagree. I don't have any like, yeah, personal like meanness of any of that, but I know that I like am part of something that like important, you know, like my brother always talked about the singularity, and I'm sure that is a gigantic thing in your mind and a rather small thing in my mind. Like I understand it conceptually, but
I think I don't know about it being a gigantic thing. I'm under the impression that the singularity is sort of the techno nerd, what is it called? Scientific materialist way of describing sort of the inevitability of the horizon. There's
right, yeah,
and like, you can't find a tradition where this thing doesn't exist and isn't imminent.
Right.
And I suspect that this is actually a reflection of the imminence of mortality. There's actually something that each of us, because we have minds that are capable of perceiving this,
right,
and then bodies that can react to it. This is sort of the mythic way that we relate to our own mortality.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that doesn't mean something in the physical world, but the reason it's so resonant and such a powerful archetype is because of the projection of mortality.
Right. And I think that like the, you know, the difference between like narcissism and not narcissism when you're talking about how big you are is the concept of like, do you see others as below you, or are how big you are equals how big everyone is if you project into other people. So, you know, narcissism is how big I am because others are small. Whereas like the concept like the egg is like how big I am because I'm actually part of, you know, all of this, and everyone is part of all of this. And that's pretty fucking huge. And I'm huge in all of this with all of that. So like, for me, the bigness of like what I want to become is a part of where everyone is going and what everything is, and my contribution to it in the same exact way, where like, you know, what I have and what I am able to give to my child doesn't make me like super smart and like really amazing because I'm so much smarter than this 4-year-old. It's my dharma to be part of his journey and to guide him. And I feel that way about like everyone. And I feel like you do, of like, I have this amazing ability to see and feel and connect the dots and articulate that and help other people level up. And the more the people who can do that are helping other people level up, the more people are leveling up, and the more we're all leveling up. I mean, the people who are able to and wanting to, but then to me, the singularity is kind of that concept. Time is all happening simultaneously. And as you are at a more evolved, you know, consciousness in this current moment, and you know, like you're kind of, it's also like linear of like where you started as like the lowest form of consciousness to where you're going as like the one that becomes God of, you know, that is everything. Like, so anyway, that's a force in me. So I want to have more kids. I want to do that, and that includes doing school and all of that. But like, I would put school on the back burner to have another child, because that is definitely like a thing with a ticking clock. Like, I want to do that. And like, so I have all of these forces, you know, tons of forces. I want to feel more healthy in my body. I want to like have an environment around me that feels good and healthy and all of that. I want my child to have as much of me as he could possibly like need, but not more than he needs by any means. And like all of these things, like all of these forces, like Esther Hicks talks about, Abraham Hicks talks about rockets of desire, you know, but you have so many of them going at the same time in so many places that you're trying to go. So to presume to be the one to know, just because I'm focusing right now on like my school is starting on January 11th, and I want to write this thing, these workshops, so that I can do that on January 11th, which is going to be really fun. Do my first workshop the same week that my school starts. So like those are forces. So I need to do these things. And then if those things aren't getting done, it's not my job to say that they're more important than like a move or a focus or a creative project or something that brings me closer to, starting a relationship that would result in having more children. Like there are just too many rockets of desires out there. So even though you have like this thing that you're currently focused on that you feel like you should be doing, there are so many forces at play of like what it is that you're building out there, and the truth and the discernment and all of that is like helping you kind of organize all of that chaos into like something, like pull in as much as you can as quickly as you can. Maybe like the getting off of the path, just like driving on a road, like that is not the most efficient way to get there. Like going this way and like following the correct road signs and all of that is going to get you there the quickest to where you like particularly are, I'm going to say wanting to go. I was going to say going, but I think that it's wanting to go because that
well,
feels
the wanting is part of reality.
Yeah. I mean,
there's this. A lot of what you're saying reminds me a lot of so the thing that inspired the sin of believing in sin. Like I think I mentioned this in this video, watching some videos on Kabbalism in the Jewish tradition rather than the Hermetic one. There's something that is suspiciously close to an instruction from those. I don't think I mentioned it in the videos, but the idea of framing all this, saying that there's none other than the Creator, is to notice that something like the only point of choice that you have is like if you want to pretend that you have a job or that there's something you're supposed to be doing, this is about as close as you can get to it, is to recognize that each thing that appears is either the left hand or the right hand of the Creator.
Yeah.
Where then to just experience it in that sense. And I get like there's something that feels in common between what I sensed him to be meaning and what I hear you talking about in terms of observing the wake.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not any of our jobs, so to speak, which is to say it's not in our power to enact, to try to make what we want happen. But it's also important to not abandon the want, because here's the want. It's like that's like trying to reject a part of God.
Mm-hmm.
So this business of, well, then what do you do? Well, fully honoring the desires and noticing like these rockets of desires as you're talking about, and not having kind of a limp wrist about it, because your wrist is part of God too. Mm-hmm. Right? But in an important way, also still being a witness predominantly, and recognizing almost like a devotional element. Like the choice that you have is whether to devote your attention to the recognition of what's going on, mm-hmm. or you can try to fight it, although you can't really fight it. But mm-hmm. what you can do is be confused about whether you're fighting it or not, and then identify with the fight and then be utterly confused. Like
right.
Those are the options. How confused
yeah.
are you while you go willingly or be dragged? Like
right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I had a dream. I have these like prophetic dreams. I had a dream, and so I'm juice feasting, and I really loved what you said about like grounding, like meat being grounding and stuff, because that was definitely a key that I needed. But in the dream, I was like cheating. I mean, essentially, I was like eating something which like breaks my fast and like ruins everything. So I was like eating or contemplating eating or something, and there was this voice, and it said, "Why do you slow yourself down?" And in the dream, I took it as like, you're right. I don't want to slow myself down. Like I shouldn't be slowing myself down. I'm going to, not, keep ruining things essentially. And I woke up with that feeling, and I had that feeling of like, it's not like I have any problem staying with it, but like, I stay with it because I don't want to slow myself down. And then as I went through like my day, there were little things that I was like, oh, this is the slowing myself down stuff, And then it just like clicked in my head, and I was like, I'm human. Like, I'm not my higher self. Like, I'm human. And the question wasn't, why are you slowing yourself down in a condemnation way? It was an invitation to openness of like, I talk about this with parents all the time. You ask the right questions, but you ask it in the wrong tone. So like when you have, your child does something and they go, why are you doing this? Like, I have a little girl inside of me that wishes that my parents had said, why are you doing this? Let's figure it out. Instead of, why are you doing this? You used to be such a good kid. Like, why are you acting this way now? Like, really bad shit happened. And if you would slow down and let the world like be okay if I don't do the things that make me good, not a bad person, like, and just let it be and let it be okay and be open and ask, you know? So it was like, I interpreted the question as like a condemning tone, but it wasn't. I can also ask it with an openness. Why do I slow myself down? And it's
Yeah.
because I'm human, and because I don't need to just, I'm not God. I'm not my higher self. I am someone in a body, and that body does have illnesses and wants and needs and all of these things to like balance myself out with and to be grounded in. And I slow myself down because maybe the point of getting to, you know, your destination across the country isn't like just how quickly you can get there, but maybe it's about taking some detours or seeing some things that don't feel right and stopping to examine them, and, you know, like all of these other things. But like, you know, that's still like, that's kind of that divide of like AM FM and all of that, of like, you do want to get there as quickly and efficiently as possible, but you also want to ground yourself and like slow yourself down, because you're not your higher self and you're not supposed to have already gotten there, you know? And I think that like, I think that that also requires this, you know, that also requires this separation, to be able to be okay with those things, to be able to be okay with slowing yourself down, to realize that like you can't do it wrong. The only sin is believing in sin and all of those things. But yeah, I lost it.
Yeah, I think I caught the energy of it, and that it's just it's kind of fun to feel the way that like your mind moves so fast, and that your energy sort of like it has a slightly watery washing across a bunch of things, so all of the threads of your mind are all active and alive, and I can feel the passion of all of that.
Yeah.
But I think I caught the core, like the stem from which the branches grew out, like this like if I had to zoom in on one key piece, it was this business of you had a choice in how to listen to why are you slowing yourself down.
Yeah.
This business of what that choice is. This is something that I was mentally focusing on a lot. I have been focusing on for quite some time, but in the August material,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't remember if I had this example back in August, but I think I used it in one of my videos recently. This bit about with where Joe Biden came forward and ended up blurting out a comment that was something along the lines of, I want to tell the Black communities that if you don't vote for me, then you ain't Black. And this freaked out a whole bunch of people, right? There's like, and there's for me this this striking thing of the energy that I think people intended in saying something like, how dare you have said that, is something like, how dare you have had that energy in you?
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't have had that in you. Go back in time and fix that.
Mm-hmm.
Which, like they're not thinking it through all the way, but
Right,
there's
right.
something of like, what exactly is the demand? I think the demand is don't have existed.
Yeah, right. And I mean, they don't,
And,
that's not arguably not what they're saying.
right. But the thing is that even there's an orientation to that. Like a huge amount of culture is doing a very macrocosmic version of the microcosmic thing I'm hearing you say with the parents.
Mm-hmm.
There's something not only about, if I am watching Biden say something like this, is there a way that I can come from it in terms of, how is it that you dare to say this?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yes.
what causes
Right,
this?
right,
Like it becomes a causal question rather than a social force.
right, right.
Um,
But and
and
I think that asking that question, and I think that's the question that everyone wants to know, and I think the answer to it is because he's not specifically, I mean, over time he's old, like he's accumulated those patterns, right? But he's not specifically oriented towards good, and no politician like that we have is, you know, like that is successful in our structure, like is fully oriented towards good, because you have to be able to be willing to put up with like the bad and the chaos and all of that to even be willing to be a part of any of that or to be successful in it.
sure.
So
But there's also
but
some.
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
you were going to finish.
Well, I was just, yeah, that like each soul, you know, like person, individual, watching someone who is acting, and then they have that reaction of like stop existing and stuff, and it comes from this fear, right, that's like created in the you did a bad and now you're not worthy, you know, like that fear, and in that comes the question of, how do I escape this? And the answer is that you become the isness, and you can't become the isness without separating this and knowing and understanding that your job is to adjust your aim and orient towards good. And you can use the, you know, the archetypical Jesus works really well for people in religion. That's why it's so popular. You know, I know I should be like God, and I know I should be like Jesus. And I have this Bible, and it gives me a lot of information about who Jesus is and what he did, and when people deviate from God and all of that and the bad stuff that happens. And so I can structure my understanding based on those lessons that, like, I can't get other ways because there's not other options on how to get them. And so, you know, what they're learning and what feels good and what answers that question is orienting towards good, and having it removed from the fact that, like, God is always there and forgiving. And this guy died for your sins. I mean, he, you know, he wiped you clean, and he did everything for you. And, you know, that's who you want to be, and that's what you want to do. And also, you don't want to let him down, because, you know, he's out there doing that for you. But it's kind of the, you know, the masculine and feminine that you probably didn't get from your perfectly human parents, you know, of the mom that's always there and loves you. And I mean, they, you know, masculine and feminine exist in both. So, you know, both parents that always love you, but mostly your mom that's always the safe place, that's always love and always there for you, and justifying your existence, and your father who also does that, but you want to be oriented towards something that makes him proud, you know, and you're succeeding in a way, and that should be through failure, right? Like, you should be making mistakes, and he should be teaching you, and they both should be, you know. And so I think that when something goes wrong, we're kind of made aware that we don't have an orientation or an answer to the question of how is it that I'm supposed to be, so that I don't have to live with the fear that comes from this, like, thing that happens in me all of the time that is not truth. So it feels terrible in my body, and I don't like feeling it, and I don't want to feel it. So I'm just going to not look at anything that makes me feel it. It's like, back up and undo all of this, and, like, orient yourself. And so you're watching someone who isn't oriented making mistakes and causing the rifts. You know, he's operating from chaos. Like, that's a chaotic thing to say, and it creates chaos, and that's not enjoyable by anyone. Like, and it comes from a lack of orientation and order.
Right. Very importantly, there's something like where is sovereignty in this. I think it's very important to track that he's not actually creating chaos. He's inviting chaos, and others accept.
Sovereignty, can you just, like, define sovereignty?
How much control do I have over how much good you choose?
Okay. So kind of like differentiation, individual, like, willpower, choice.
Right. There's this kind of a lot of the saviorism that shows up, a lot of the rescuing pattern in the Cartman triangle sense is coming from this sense of, I think that it roots in this thing that you're talking about am I a good person? Am I deserving? But one of the ways that it shows up is this distrust that, like, a sort of presumption that, like, my role in order to be a good person is to make others be good, and to stop others from being bad, and which is me trying to take responsibility for their choices about how to orient on this job that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it comes from a lack of differentiation, which the more that you become yourself, the more you become differentiated from other people.
I had not thought of it that way. That's interesting. I'd always tied it back to this projection mechanism that you had described before. I don't know if you called it projection, but it's a classic thing from, like, Jungian psychology.
It is, and also because the more that you project and you learn from those projections, the less you need to project.
Right.
The more you become just you, and then you're differentiated from other people.
But there's something about, I think that's something like the masculine father, like, way of framing the process. This thing about differentiation. Like, I'm struck with the thing about how really little kids often have some sort of special toy or blankie or stuffed toy or something as part of the process of learning how to differentiate themselves from their mother. There's this issue of starting out as literally the same flesh.
Right.
And then constantly.
I really wish there were studies about, like, you know, if you were to take 4 years of breastfeeding as a norm, and then you were to see who deviates from that norm, and then you were to see who, you know, which children have an external, you know, toy, like blanket, you know, comfort item, when you break that relationship of breastfeeding before the age of 4. I really want to see, like the correlation in those?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I bet that all right, the state our civilization would have to be to actually care about a question like that would be one that wouldn't need the answer to that question.
Break my heart.
But,
I know.
but the standard theory for
Okay, well, that's my judgment that just says, not me. I breastfed my son until he was 4 years old, not me. And still, like, now what we decided at 4, because it was like such a little like crutch thing, he just wanted to nurse for like a second. But now he pulls my shirt up and lays his head on my belly and like wants belly time. So he lays his head on my bare belly and gets his oxytocin that way. And it's like the sweetest thing.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Yeah, so my judgment and like heartbreak and all of that is literally just a sign from inside of me that's like, not me, like that's not compatible with who I am. And obviously that's been proven because that's how I live my life, breastfeeding through 4 and still being, you know, weaning through the oxytocin and all of that. So,
yeah.
Anyway,
it feels really dear to me. There's like that highlighted something about this whole theory arc that I actually hadn't noticed before. The way the normal theory goes is that the reason for these, I forget what they're called, but it's like a transition objects, is that the child is practicing being individuated from the mother, but needs some sort of symbolic representation of the mother in order to enact that. Which is part of why you get such separation anxiety showing up with trying to wash the kid's special blanket.
Yeah, well, I think there's also a lot of like, I mean, it takes actually breastfeeding to really be aware of this, but like when you give birth, like, okay, for me, my pregnancy was very toxic. I ate like the world's worst food and gained 85 pounds. But like post birth and everything, like the body odor is horrific. And your baby's face is like right in your like smell zone. And so then your baby smells like this like horrific body odor all of the time. And there is something about like that separation from the mother's microbiome. I mean, your baby is born sterile. Like you are populating that new human with bacteria from your body, and your body, not you, my body like changes the microbiome, like the, you know, bacteria like grows down the thighs and stuff to make sure that the baby on the way out catches all like the bacteria that needs to go into the bowels so that it can taste all that. And then there's oligosaccharides in the breast milk that keep that bacteria fed when there isn't food, and all of those things. And so there's like a big mechanism with like a big, well, that's not the right word, but with their, you know, their love object, that it's usually something like soft that can hold a lot of bacteria and help them like continue to cultivate that complex microbiome that will build their immune system, that won't be done until they're 4, and you're supposed to be supporting it with breast milk until they're 4 but will help create that. So then when you wash it, you like wipe out that bacterial colony that's like their mother, you know, they're like, I mean, literally, like that's what we call like the bacterial colony in kombucha or, you know, apple cider vinegar, or what it's called, the mother. Like this apple cider vinegar contains the mother in it. Like that's what it's called. Like the mother is the bacterial colony that populates you. And we know that, like, I mean, how much bacteria is like programming you and your thoughts and your experience and really, like, if you want to take the whole, like, you know, you and me and all of the people on the whole planet and the whole cosmos and all of that, okay, well, let's zoom in a little bit to like the billions of bacteria inhabiting my body really running the show here. Anyway, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm enjoying the fact that we managed to hit one of your rant buttons. Like I thought I had rant buttons around child rearing, and it's like, oh, whoa, okay. No, this is beautiful. This is actually really good stuff, and I'm quite enjoying it. The thing that I had wanted to touch on about the separation anxiety is that the fact that there is anxiety associated with it, like little kids when they're learning how to walk before they've gotten the separation objects, don't freak out by being a little bit distant from mom, like trying to stand up and walking towards mom. There's a challenge, but there's a kind of joy in it as well. And you don't find, as far as I know, kids setting down their object and trying to walk away from it, feeling the intensity and then going back to it. It's actually just a freak out saying, no, don't take this away from me. So it highlights something about, like, I don't understand what the mechanism is yet. I sort of have a glimmer of it. I'll probably, knowing how my mind works, I'll probably have an answer by the end of the day. But but there's something something that really stands out about this business of caring for and doing the breastfeeding arc for much later as a way of sidestepping this issue of making the separation process traumatic, being able to hold them through that process. I just hadn't thought of that before. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that. I'm also aware that we're something like 3 to 6 tangents off from several different topics. I've kind of lost track.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am going to want to wrap this up in about
like
20-ish minutes.
Then, yeah, I will need to too. Yeah, I mean, maybe we can go to my question. I don't know how much we can keep exploring on the terrain we were. I think we both need to do some digesting on all of the leading edges we've approached. My question, or like the thing that is a void, so you have like the concept of, I to finish off what I was saying before, you've got like God and Jesus. And so I just looked up, like just an hour before the video, I looked up like just what is biblically like the Holy Spirit and stuff. And I found that interesting because that feels a little bit more like the wind beneath my wings, like the God, force. Yeah, I had kind of had like a clue. So my question and like the void that I have is grace. Like I feel like my mind is filling in like all of this stuff, and then when it comes to grace, it feels very like oddly blank to me. Not even like emotional or reactive or anything along those lines, but like I need some sort of like paradigm shift or click as to like like it's a moving part that I can't place. Do you have any thoughts?
I have thoughts. I definitely don't have an answer. I feel like somehow you and I are asking the same kind of question. I didn't think to frame it as grace, but if we're pointing at the same thing, like when you say grace and the resonance I get off of that, this strikes me as the thing I mean when I ask the question, is God actually benevolent? What does it mean for God to be benevolent? So I want to share a piece of my own experience from Mexico to highlight a piece where I have a lived experience of some of this, but I don't understand it. I don't have a good model of it. And I actually have a lot of models that say that what I experienced shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
So, right. So I went through a total of 9 Bufo ceremonies. The 4th one was easily the most traumatic and horrible experience of my life. As I went in there with a recognition that I was struggling with something. I couldn't quite see what the something was, but it kept rebuilding itself. It was related to this whole business of, like, am I messing up? Am I messing up on my life plan? Is there something I'm supposed to be doing? How do I orient to this? And I recognized, because of the way of the stubbornness of it and the way that everybody around me was talking about this way of orienting to the experience of death, and what ego death actually feels like on the inside isn't ego death, it feels like dying.
Yes.
A number of people talking about how some of their experiences on Bufo, when they actually go through letting the part of themselves that is no longer in service die, the identification with it makes it feel as though physiologically they are going through the process of literally physically dying, and kind of freaking out a bit because, hey, these people who are supposed to be protecting me and holding space for me are just looking at me and doing more singing and rattling, and what the fuck, why don't you call an ambulance? Except that your mind isn't working, so you can't even think those thoughts, you're just flipping your shit. So recognizing all that, I went into the 4th ceremony with this sense of, okay, this is so antithetical to my entire existence, but this is an identity issue. I'm going to open myself to dying. And if I just don't come out of this ceremony, then I open myself to that possibility. Because I wanted this thing addressed. And my only request was, if this is going to be it for me, could you, like this is the most, I think the expression that I actually ended up giving was something like, this is the most vulnerable thing I have ever done. Please be gentle. And the experience that I had, like shooting outside of time, encountering the vastness of everything, and then coming back in. There's something about the transition of coming back in that has been systematically horrific for me. I think my mind reaches farther into the transcendental space than something like is optimal for delight. I think if my mind hadn't been there, I probably could have experienced it as bliss, but I was making sense of too much. So after I landed, I felt tremendously violated. I had felt, there was this vivid sense of how none of this is here. That was a real experiential obviousness, that I'm just sort of pretending that time is happening. I can remember this fact, but I wasn't experientially remembering it. But it was starting to come into being. I was starting to bridge that gap, especially after 4 ceremonies like this. And this way in which, yes, God is infinitely benevolent. Also, God is infinitely malevolent. Also, God is infinitely apathetic. Because to the extent that you want to say that God is a thing or a being or anything like that, God has literally all the attributes all at once, but all differentiated, but all the same, but all of everything.
Yeah.
And like, okay, and just encountering that as an experiential reality gave me this tremendous sense of deep existential threat.
Yeah.
The sense of nothing is safe. Safety is not possible. There's no way that anything can ever be okay, because that okayness will all come mixed with the not okayness, and all I can do is be delusional and experience only one part of that. So that would have been my experience coming out of that, and feeling deeply violated because I had gone into that experience basically begging, if I'm going to end, can you please make the end at least merciful? And it's like, how about the opposite of all that? How about we don't end you, but we make your life a living hell? And like, great. So going through that and going into the 5th ceremony, I was actually seriously considering just leaving the whole process, because it was something like, if this is what knowledge is, and knowledge is just discovering that everything is horrible forever, then maybe I want to be ignorant for the time I'm here. And but I also had this factoid hovering in my mind about, this is obviously a trauma, and I'm told somehow that there's benevolence on the other side of all of this. I've seen for myself the way that that's not there, but apparently this is what it's like to activate the trauma. So do I want to believe my theories, or do I want to believe my lived experience within the trauma?
No.
So what I decided to do, they've been giving us 50 milligrams for each of the first 4 ceremonies. And I'd said, yeah, well, I mean, for Bufo, which is like, you'd use much smaller amounts for the 5-MeO DMT if you're doing the synthetic versions. But instead of 50 milligrams for the 5th ceremony, I said, give me 5. Give me 5 milligrams. They're saying, you're not going to feel anything. And I went, I am such a no for doing 10. I'm going to do 5. Well, I have another 5 available in case it turns out you're right and this is too weak. But I'm doing 1/10 the amount. This stuff hits super fast. It takes like 15 to 20 seconds to actually do the effect. It comes through smoking. When I got about 2/3 of the way through the 5 milligram pipe, I started to feel the way that reality was shimmering, and I was hitting the edge of time already. And I just spat out the smoke. You're supposed to hold it in your lungs for about 10 seconds after inhaling it. And I just blasted it out. And as reality started to do its guess where you're going kind of thing, I had looked at one of the facilitators there and said, Ed, that was almost too much. I'm glad I stopped when I did. And she was just holding space for me. I know both of them very well, like excellent space holders. It was just being very present. And I was trying to hold on to some semblance of reality, and then just watching it slide out. And all of the fear and terror of dealing with going into that world just hit. And I just collapsed I started screaming. Like I was crying and screaming. But it wasn't exactly panicked. It was more like actually fully full-bodied, full throat expressing how scared I was of existence. That actually felt like the first time I had let go in memory to that depth.
Wow.
The going through that, I didn't actually go anywhere bad. I ended up like the whole experience just pulled me right back from the edge. But the whole time it never felt like a threat. It felt like there was a kind of intelligence guiding the whole process. The both of them sang for me and held me in ways that were just absolutely perfect for digesting this in a somatic way. Um, and then after I felt like I went through the main arc of it, I had collapsed backwards and just enjoyed the beauty of the trees around me. There was absolutely a sense of what I think would be fair to call grace. Absolutely in that. Um, I got a whole lot from that one session, but one of them was the sense in which the reason why I had been going through such hell was because of a kind of desperation on my part where I was pushing in a way that it wasn't true for me and for my path. I was making myself work harder than was kind to me.
Yeah.
And I was ignoring that out of this sense of I needed to get somewhere. So this whole process felt like it just removed all of that. Very early on in this whole video series, this is one of the things I mentioned about, I just gave up on the spiritual path. And the reason is that what I meant by the spiritual path had this as though there's something I need to walk and to get somewhere. And that had been disconnecting me from something. And I think I even knew that and I had the intellectual of it, but I couldn't process it in the body. So that whole arc of going through the most miserable experience of my life and then being held in this way, part of the confusion was that I could see the way in which I was going to encounter the same thing I had encountered before. And that's what triggered all of that experience. But that there was a kind of intelligence there whose entire arc was holding me into a space of bringing me somewhere that was kind, that had given me a tremendous amount of space and was taking away the pain that I was inflicting on myself. I remember lying there, I said something like, this is the first time in my life that I have felt the possibility that God might be loving. One of the facilitators there sort of was smiling and laughed a little bit and said, yeah, it's funny to hear you say that. I would say God is love. And I sort of laughed and went, I am so not ready to go that far.
Wow.
But there's a very lived truth of all of that. So in the whole arc of that experience, it felt so obvious to me, sort of looking back across the whole arc of it, and also in the middle of it, but not in the hell experience. But in the arc of the whole thing, the way in which it's like the hell experience was related to me trying to see God's mind without having the heart in the right chiropractic position or something. And that there's something about there being a difference. And to me, this makes no sense. This is part of, like, it even makes no sense beyond, like, I feel like I can describe the experiences of the ineffable in fair amounts of phenomenological detail. I actually don't have much trouble with that. So in that sense, it's like accessible, and what I run into are problems with linguistic grammar trying to be consistent, because the grammar presumes things like time, and I have to play games with language in order to accurately describe what I'm talking about. But I have no confusion about it. Like, I can make sense of it. But this is a level at which I can't make sense of it because I can see something that makes enormous sense to me. But when I stare at it and I process that with my heart, it's kind of horrifying. And that's what I encountered in that fourth ceremony. It's as though what's going on with God's heart and the experience of the movement from God's heart is this grace. I don't see how it can possibly be different from what I saw. I don't understand how it sorts out the differentiation. None of that makes sense to me, but I've experienced it.
You lost me. Just like, I would like rewind like a minute or 2 minutes or something.
Oh, okay.
Because that last part that you said, and then you were talking about differentiation. I missed whatever was on the other side of that.
So the differentiation I'm making is basically between God's mind and God's heart.
Okay.
And to me, it doesn't make any sense that there can be a differentiation of anything at that level. That, like, I don't see how the mind and heart can be more differentiated than potatoes and philosophy.
So I feel like I can conceptualize. I'm presuming I'm conceptualizing what you're saying, what you're referring to as God's heart as like being the grace. I'm missing
source of grace.
Yeah, I'm missing the mind part. The what?
Well, admittedly, I didn't describe the horrid experience. That may be what's missing here.
Do you feel like that horrid experience and what you got was the God's mind part?
Yeah, it was God's mind without my heart being tuned to God's heart. The part of what I slammed into, part of the reason it was horrifying was not, oh, I'm having bad experiences. That wasn't the issue. The issue was I saw a level of truth about the structure of existence that had infinite eternal bliss and infinite eternal horror and infinite eternal nothingness, and every moment is eternal. Actually, there's only one moment. There's this moment of realizing, am I conscious? That is the only question that all of existence ever asks. And then in the next moment, which is an illusion because of the way that time works, as though that thought of that question having been asked is a thought that has a potential to be called in the eternal moment. And in this eternal moment, there's this sense of disorientation, and the disorientation is all that ever exists. There's this every point is eternal and is everything. And because that includes things like, well, there's basically heaven, but there's also basically hell. There's also being dead.
So, okay, the way that I need to see if this is aligning or can shift and is applicable. The way that I conceptualize it, it's like it overlaps, but then what you're saying as God's mind is something else. In the way that I understand, like the religious group that I'm in, which are like not within the Seventh-day Adventist church, but that's the closest that they believe, and the concept of them is essentially God is agape, and there's no like darkness to God. There's no malevolence or maliciousness or hell or any of those things. And the way that I've described the way what they do, because they're like, missionaries in a way, they want to spread this. They want to help other people see that God isn't bad and he's only loving, which I think is this, and so the way that I described it at one point and had come through me was they work to animate the light. So the good and the love is God, and it's a thing, and we can attribute, kind of desire to it and all of that, and de-animate the darkness. So you have to do those things simultaneously to essentially do what I feel like I do and to do what they want to do, which is animating the light and de-animating the darkness. And the way that I view what you just described in my terms would be like here on earth, we have the sun, and the sun is like, necessary to create life and all of that. And then, you can block it out entirely and be in darkness. And the darkness, though, isn't animate. There can be something that is alive that came from the life that the sun brings that is hiding in the darkness that you cannot see. And then it's terrifying because it could be any number of dangerous things that could kill you. But the darkness itself isn't animate. It's only a lack of light. And so in my mind, what you're describing is God's heart is God. And then like love, it is just isness. And then there's either that or there's what happens when you cut that off. And then there's the lack of it.
My first instinct is just to say, no, that's not what I mean.
Okay.
But I hesitate because there's something like maybe secretly that's what I mean, and the issue is that I don't see it. But the issue is
way too, so.
yeah. So the issue is something like this perspective where we view, well, the darkness isn't actually a thing; it's just the lack of light. Mm-hmm. That is a perspective. You could also have another perspective, like poof, here's this thought experiment. Maybe the darkness is the real thing and light is the absence of darkness, right? Just perfectly symmetric. Now, there's this, the fact that that thought is possible to think demonstrates that that experience is part of existence,
Mhm.
which means it is one of the forms of God. And so there's something about how literally all possibilities exist before manifestation. Part of the whole game of being in time is that you're ignoring most of existence in order to have a very particular type of experience
Mhm.
that has contrast. Like here, we're having a conversation as opposed to not having a conversation. It's possible to experience those two things separately, which is fascinating.
Mhm.
Um, the the issue is something like because the pre-manifestation is also pre the manifestation of time. Uh, all of everything already exists and is here now. That's why it's a kind of ignoring in order to be able to experience this whole thing. Ignorance is literally what it means to be alive. And time is made of ignorance. Time is made of forgetting in a particular way.
Yeah.
So there's this issue where yes, of course, the version of God that you're talking about is a version that exists within all of being. And we can even be loose about like I notice that intuitively the default thing that my mind wants to do is pretend that God is a being, and recognizing, well, that's shorthand. It's much more complicated than that. It's
Right.
literally incomprehensibly more complicated. But even adding that caveat, there's still something of, well, there's an assertion that's being made here, which is something that about God is this light, and there's this cutting off thing, as opposed to a different version, which is God is a malevolent fucker who just wants to create consciousness in order to have people suffer. And that occasionally these pockets of the illusion of maybe there is some sort of mercy in the future is actually part of the delusion. This is actually something close to the Gnostic view. Part of the whole Gnostic vision of dealing with reality is that the ruler of this world, the creator, is actually malevolent and is constantly trying to trick you.
Mhm.
With question marks about, is there a true absolute God beyond the demiurge? Depends on which version of Gnosticism you're hunting down. So part of what I ran into was encountering the all, which was, oh yeah, God is infinitely benevolent. Also, God is infinitely malevolent. Also, those two interact. Also, they don't interact. Both
Mhm.
and neither at the same time, simultaneously, forever, eternally.
Right.
Um, so there's a kind of obviousness about, if it's possible, then in the atemporal it's actual, that
Yeah.
gives me this like uh
Right.
what does it mean to say God is benevolent? Because yeah, sure, God's benevolent. God's also malevolent. Also, God is apathetic. Also,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I definitely agree with you, and I feel like it's very like it clicked into places something that made sense, laying atop a structure of an argument about heaven and hell and whether or not heaven and hell exist, because for me that makes sense because we live in a mind and that creates our reality in a way, like it's a governor, that allows things to come through us, and it changes how things come through us, and we can deprive it of, you can take a bunch of ecstasy a few times and like completely deprive it of serotonin and dopamine and like create hell, like you can do those things, and you can create heaven, and you can, you can do some heroin and like create heaven, and like you can have that and you can live that, and like, so an argument for either of those things like absolutely does exist on the level of like you're saying, like you can live anything, you can create anything and live it, and I think that putting this on top of that makes it make a lot of sense. Like the example that came to mind is that my mother has a strong sense of malevolence and a strong like awareness that it's a threat that's like always there and kind of always picking on her because she was raised with a brother who was malevolent, like very often to her. He would just find ways to antagonize her that were strictly cruel with like no other, and she loved him and grew up to be a woman who loved all of her siblings, all of her brothers, despite how horrifically they treated her and the horrible things that they did to her, you know, but the one was like truly malicious, and he would like take like a pin and just be standing next to her and stab her with it where nobody could see. And so she would react, you know, like flip out and hit him for attacking her. And then she would get in trouble because she just flipped out and started hitting on her brother. And so he just like gaslit her to the most extreme ways, and it was just fun for him to like lock her in a closet and see what happened. And like, but it was like pure malevolence that she was raised with, you know, that she like experienced, and is a strong pathway that exists in her mind. And her mind is very different from my mind. That doesn't exist for me. And the concept of malevolence, I don't see that in people, and it's hard for me to really believe that it exists, even though, I mean, my mother is like a testament to the fact that it does exist, and that, you know, it existing in her mind, it creates that in her reality, you know, it is, and she projects it onto things. So then it continues to exist. And I think that, you know, your experience and the maliciousness and the darkness and the animate darkness does exist in the way that anything exists, which is through you, if you are oriented to it, if your mind is capable and programmed to create it.
Sure. Yeah. There's yeah. So there is part of the challenge for me in terms of the mental side of this. And I'm actually noticing in having this conversation, there's still apparently a lot of the energy of that fear that's still alive in me. So it's giving me a sense of,
I
there's
really
more
would like
to
to like see if I can try something with you, but like I need to go. My mom's gonna need to leave soon, and she's got my son, so I need to go get him. But yeah, there's something that I would like to try with you, but just to see, I don't know. It feels like it's just as likely a dead end and not appropriate for you as it could be like exactly what you need. And
that is totally fine. I am happy to play.
yeah.
So we can connect at some future point.
Yeah, definitely. This is an amazing, absolutely amazing conversation. It's so cool. I loved just being a person who could be as excited as I was about this conversation and have like no attachment or nervousness or fear or anything along those lines. Like just feel like a spectator, and then watch things like, you know, kind of like manifest as like expectations or desires that, you know, wanted to come through, and just be like, maybe that's what's gonna happen, you know, like, and it'll just be amazing to see if that's what happens, and just be excited about it. So it's what a cool opportunity.
Yeah. I could feel your excitement leading up to this, and yeah, there's like, it was a lot of the yes from me of diving into this was the type of energy that you brought to this. And like I'm certainly like intellectually very interested in all of this dancing and comparing notes with somebody who's clearly going through a similar type of thing in a particular way. But yeah, this has just been really really exciting and delicious to swim in, and I definitely got a lot out of this.
Yeah, me too.
I find myself swimming with a bunch of exciting confusions.
Yeah, I know. I feel like half of my excitement is like how well this conversation went and the connection and all that we co-created. And then the other half is like, I can't wait to watch all of what was created here, the leading edge and the little like pieces that were put out there that I get to go find and explore and see like grow and extrapolate and reconnect to all of the rest of it. And then there's a new leading edge to explore, and that's exciting too.
Yes.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for letting me hop on and duel with you here on your live.
Absolutely. Thank you for hopping on. And I look forward to connecting and seeing what you want to inflict on me.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Shadow hunting. The worst stuff anybody could ever ask you to do, really, truly.
I've done quite a lot of shadow hunting, and there's a part of me that gets excited about it. Ooh, I get to suffer. Man. I get to end suffering more. I suffer extra.
It's like you know. I think it's Jordan Peterson. He talks about his son Drew. His son tells this story of a dragon that he's afraid of, or something. I'm gonna botch this, but anyway, the concept is that it was his son or a small child, I don't know, who said that he was afraid, he was having nightmares of a dragon or something, and he said, you know, well, what should you do, you know, like what can you do about it? And he was like, well, I guess I can get my sword and my shield, and or I can get a sword. And then he said that he would pierce the dragon, and he would go into the heart of the dragon and get a shield, like one of his scales or something, and then he could protect himself with the shield, but then also, you know, the dragon would be dead. But and he was like, that's exactly right, you know. And like, but that's what it feels like, is like, number one, you hear a roaring and you don't know not to go that way, so that's the way that you've got to go. And then the closer you get to the cave, the more loud the dragon sounds, the more terrifying it sounds, and you have to actually get in there, and then it's this hologram of a dragon, but it's blowing fire at you, and it's the most terrifying thing that, even if you know it's a hologram, you know, it's like all of the fear, and that's the thing that you're supposed to be running from. But then you've got to go to the heart of it and get into it, like not even just approach it, but like go into its body. But then the dragon goes away, and then you have this strength, this self-confidence, you know, like I love the concept of self-confidence being built by doing the thing that you believed you could not do, you know. So like you have the self-confidence, and you have the armor that's built from the scales of the dragon and the treasure that it was holding, and, you know, all of those things. And it's like, that's what shadow hunting is, you know, like it's going past all the signs that say wrong way, like, well, this is obviously the way, because it's my brain trying to protect me from the thing it thinks is so scary in there. And then you got to go actually do the scary thing, but you get the best stuff from it. And the more that you do that, the more you integrate parts of yourself, and the more you become yourself, and the more you differentiate from other people, and the more awesome you become, and the more amazed you are at who you are. And like, it's just the best stuff you can do. Like, then you try to tell somebody that, and they're like, nope, definitely says wrong way. You know,
you know, it's
that means go that way, and they're like, no, it says wrong way. I don't go that way. I'm like, okay.
I tried taking 2 steps that way, and it got worse. So.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, there's a dragon roaring over there. Like, yeah, I know. That's where you're supposed to. You're not ready. That's fine. I'm only trying to live vicariously through you, because I don't know where any more of my dragons are. I've fought so many of them. Sounds like you got a scary one, though.
Well, yeah, that was actually the whole reason I went to Mexico. This one had been roaring for a while, and I really don't want to look at this one at all, so that's where I'm going.
Awesome. Well, I mean, that's an amazing approach, and I would love to approach things that way and see what happens. Also, that's kind of terrifying, because I've felt my mind descend into chaos, and then I've been by my brother's side when his brain broke from drugs, and that took him like 6 years to recover from. So there's also the scariness of like, maybe I'm not built to handle like things, like he wasn't built to handle things like that broke. But I also, in my experience, just working with myself and working with other people, like my approaches feels just like the rightest, I guess. Like, so it'll just be interesting to see if that applies to you in a way, and finds like a resolution in the rooting out of the origin, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming conversation with me and exploring the edge of chaos.
Yeah, this is magnificent. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.